Chapter 187. Now, I will explain the next phase to you. Gradier Xanatus voiced out next. The hall quietened down after he said that. The participants perked their ears to make sure they listened to every detail. Oh, right before that, your assessment score for the endurance test will now be revealed, Gradier Xanatus said while snapping his fingers. Snap. Zing. 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 Small holographic squares started appearing in front of the participants. In a few seconds, everyone could see holographic projections in front of them. On the holographic projection, a list was displayed. Endurance score was the first on the list. The endurance scores ranged from 1 to 10. Dash, I got a 6. Dash, I got a 5. Dash, what did you get? A 7? Dash, I got a 5.5. Voices of different participants discussing their friend's assessment test result could be heard. Angie checked hers and saw the score 7. 7. She smiled after seeing her score and looked ahead for Gustav, but he was far away, so she couldn't see him properly. I wonder what his score is. Angie wondered. Gustav got to the hall before her, so they were seated in separate positions. So far, only 3 people had gotten beyond the score of 7, and that was Glade, Timmy, and Rhea. The people sitting around them shouted it out when they saw it. Timmy had a score of 8. 3, while Rhea had a score of 8. Dash, she has got to be the highest. Dash, a score of 8. 9. Dash, wow, who is she? The people around Glade reacted with shocked looks when they saw her score. She must have been the first to arrive then. They all felt that she must be quite powerful and decided to be on the lookout for her. What they didn't know was Glade was currently wondering within herself what a particular person would get since she managed to get such a high score. Maybe he got a 10. She stared at the side of a blonde boy's face 3 seats ahead. The same question was on the mind of Timmy and Rhea. Gustav stared at his assessment score with a look of confusion. Excuse me, Gustav voiced out while raising his hand. The hall quietened after hearing him. Although his voice was low, it sounded pretty compelling and powerful that everyone turned and focused on him. Is there a reason why my score shows this? I don't know what this means. Gustav pointed at his assessment score, which had a plus sign in front of it. Everyone also stared at it with a confused expression. Oh, yes, that, Gradier Xanatus said with a smile. This simply means your score for endurance hasn't been assessed. Or rather, it is still being calculated, Gradier Xanatus said. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The whole place became noisy again after hearing that. Dash, does that mean he was so bad that his score couldn't be calculated? Dash, I don't think that's it. I remember he got there before I did. Dash, what exactly does that mean? Your performance was beyond the prescribed level for that phase, so you might need to be reassessed, Gradier Xanatus added. Gasp. The entire hall became extremely shocked upon hearing the last statement of Gradier Xanatus. Performance. Beyond the level of the first phase? Doesn't that make him the highest? Everyone turned to stare at Gustav again with their mouths agape. Angie smiled after seeing everyone's reaction. As expected of him, everywhere he goes, people are always amazed by his deeds, she said internally. Oh, I see. Gustav didn't need any further explanation to understand what was happening. Maybe I should have tried less. Being on the receiving end of this kind of attention is pretty weird, Gustav said internally as he took his seat. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The participants within the room were astonished and started chattering about him after realizing that he must have been the first to arrive and not Glade, as expected of someone that arrived 30 minutes earlier. He even got beyond a perfect score. Gladier, Timmy, and Rhea had thoughts similar to this as they smiled wryly. Who knew how they'd feel if they were told that Gustav also rested for several hours before deciding to continue moving. Gradier Xanatus coughed twice, causing the place to quieten again. As you can see, there are other candidate assessments besides endurance that haven't been calculated yet, he said. Everyone nodded as they stared at the others. Apart from endurance, there was also strength, combat prowess, mental capacity, and 6 others. They had no score in front of them like the others. It would seem that these assessments would be calculated as the entrance test continued. Now, the next phase will be based on mental capacity. Gradier's Annatus continued. You all will be immersed in a space along with participants from the other floors. In this space, every object, sound, landscape can either be real or be an illusion. In this phase, you have to differentiate between reality and illusion. In other words, your senses will be tricked. So, the aim of this test is to see how you lots can handle it. Gradier's Annatus added. So, it turns out there were other floors where tests were also going on, Gustav said internally after hearing Gradier's Annatus explanation. He felt like the numbers should have been higher than they were from the onset. This made everyone realize that Gradier's Annatus wasn't the only supervisor in the building. He was only in charge of the batches transported to this floor when everyone arrived inside the tower. Lastly, you all have 6 hours to find a way out of this space after being sent in. That is the greatest challenge since the entrance or exit you find might just be an illusion, Gradier's Annatus explained. The participants became tensed upon hearing that. They never thought they'd have to go through such a complicated test. They currently couldn't imagine how they were going to be able to differentiate illusion from reality. Chapter 188. We'll be using a low-level brain inducer to send you all to that space. Therefore, it's not going to be above what your age group can handle. It's a virtual space, but at the same time, everything will be real except for what we want to portray as fake. The rest will be up to you, Gradier's Annatus voiced out. Low-level brain inducer? Gustav contemplated after hearing Gradier's Annatus explanation. I hope this doesn't end up being troublesome. The participants still had lots of questions and looks of wariness, but they knew that the explanation wouldn't be more than this. Zing, 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 zing. The hall brightened up as participants began to disappear from their seating positions one after the other. Gustav also disappeared along with them in a few seconds. When the light surrounding him disappeared, he found himself in a hall that was larger than every space the participants had been in so far. It wasn't really a hall. It looked more like a lab because tub-like machines could be seen in rows and columns that extended as far as the eyes could see. A glass wall could be seen 700 feet above on the right side of the wall. Within the glass walls, 5 people could be seen dressed like Gradier's Annatus. 2 women and 3 men within the glass walls were dressed in orange uniforms with black stripes. They had authoritative looks on their faces. One of them, with a rhino horn on his forehead, folded his arms with a frown on his face. He looked down at the participants who kept appearing within the laboratory. They all had their different ways of standing that looked quite menacing. Gradier's Annatus stood in their midst. He looked quite tame compared to the rest of them with his hands locked behind his back. Find the pod that has your number on it, Gradier's Annatus said, his voice traveling through the large laboratory-like room. More than 1,000 participants were moving around the place at the moment. The participants from Gustav's batch could see a lot of unrecognizable faces. They instantly understood that these were the participants from other batches that had tests on separate floors. The participants began to find their pods one after the other. Gradier's Annatus instructed this set of participants to go in next. TSSHHH, TSSHHH, TSSHHH. The pods opened up, and they entered it to lie down. It closed back immediately after that, and a red bar appeared above every pod that had been closed up. Inside, the participants could only see blue and green glowing lines across the smooth surface within the pod. Surprisingly, they could still hear Gradier's Annatus voice inside the pod. However, it wasn't coming in sound waves. Instead, it was resounding in their minds, giving them some other instructions and reminding them what this is all about. Gustav was already inside his. Being inside the pod reminded him of when he used to sleep in a bathtub. Gustav smiled. I wonder what happened to that bathtub now. Maybe they put it away. Gustav wasn't really bothered by the pod, reminding him of such times within his former household. He had gotten so used to sleeping inside the hard tub that he didn't feel uncomfortable lying down inside the pod. The same couldn't be said for a lot of other participants who kept turning their bodies because they weren't comfortable within the pod. Gradier's Anata stopped talking and wished the participants good luck as the pod began to function. The red bar that appeared on top of everyone's pod started filling up, and in a matter of a few seconds, it filled up completely. Ting, 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 ting. The red bar turned green, and the participants felt their consciousness being pulled out of them. Their head turned woozy, and before they knew it, they had lost consciousness. After a few seconds, they opened their eyes and found themselves in an unfamiliar world blazing with green and yellow fire. Gradier's Anatus and the rest of the other supervisors stared at the large lab and watched as the bars on their pods turned green. Looks like it will be starting soon. Let's get the projection of the furry world up here, one of the supervisors, who happened to be a lady with blue hair all over her face, said. Truin, a holographic projection appeared in front of them that displayed a world blazing with green and yellow fire. They could see the participants appearing all over the place, one after the other on the projection. Sirs Anatus, do you think there might be any special class material among these lots? One of the supervisors with green, worm-like hairs asked. Don't be ridiculous, Valgus. Do you think a candidate with the potential of being special class will appear here? The man with a rhino horn dismissed with a deep tone. I think someone like that has appeared already, Gradier's Anatus answered with a mischievous smile. Dash, what? Dash amongst them? Dash impossible. 3 of the supervisors voiced out at the same time. Why would TH? The supervisor with a rhino horn was speaking when the female supervisor with blue facial hair interrupted. Sirs Anatus, there seems to be a dysfunctional pod over there. She pointed at the western part of the lab. Huh? The 4 of them turned to the side and stared at the direction she was pointing in. Among the thousands of pods with a green bar on them, a particular one still glowed red. Check what's going on with that pod, Gradier's Anatus instructed. One of them nodded and proceeded to jump through the glass wall. Swan, the supervisor's body phased through the glass and traveled across the air for several thousand feet before landing in front of the said pod. It says, unable to initialize brain waves, the supervisor voiced out. Although he was more than 1,000 feet away, they understood what he was saying. However, they were confused by that statement. It'll call for the maintenance tech team to check up on it. The other female supervisor with black, flowing hair voiced out. I don't think there's any need for that, Gradier's Anatus said, and gestured for the supervisor with a rhino horn to open up the pod. TSSHHH. The pod opened up, and a boy with blonde hair could be seen lying within it. Ah, damn. I had a feeling that this was going to happen. Chapter 189. I don't think there's any need for that, Gradier's Anatus said, and gestured to the supervisor with a rhino horn to open up the pod. TSSHHH. The pod opened up, and a boy with blonde hair could be seen lying within it. Ah, damn. I had a feeling that this was going to happen. The person within the pod was none other than Gustav. He sat up when the pod slid open, and the supervisor stared at his frame from within the glass wall. Just as I thought. It's him, Gradier's Anatus said internally with a smile. A few moments ago, when the pod bar filled up and everyone's consciousness was manipulated, Gustav also felt it. His head was a bit woozy for a second, but in the next second, system notifications popped up in his line of sight. Host brainwaves are being manipulated by external forces. Mental fortitude needed for blocking brain manipulation. 30. Host has acquired enough mental fortitude to hindering brain manipulation. Brain manipulation has been successfully hindered. Gustav felt like cursing when he saw this. He knew mental fortitude was good since it protected his mind, but in this situation, it was actually doing more harm than good. He really wouldn't like to stand out much. Yes, he was planning to reveal some of his hidden abilities during the test phase. However, at the rate things were going now, he might end up being too outstanding, and he didn't know how that would end up for him. Gustav didn't want to reveal the full capabilities of his mental fortitude because he was sure they were going to see him as an anomaly. Currently, his mental fortitude was so high that he could even control his dreams and change them to whatever he wanted when he is asleep. If he had a bad dream, he could just switch it or turn off his dreams entirely. There were other things that mental fortitude had granted him. He wanted to make sure they weren't revealed. If there was a way he could reduce the stats, he would have done that immediately. Unfortunately, there wasn't. TSSHHH. Ah, damn. I had a feeling this was going to happen. The instructors might need to use a high-level brain inducer, Gustav said, internally while sitting up after the pod slid open. Kid, step out for a bit, the supervisor instructed. Gustav did as he was told and came out. The supervisor moved closer to the pod and started checking it out. I wonder what's wrong with this. Before he could complete his statement, he heard a voice in his mind. There's nothing wrong with the pod. Chucks. Bring the kid here. It was the voice of Gradier Zanatus in his mind. There's nothing wrong with the pod? Then why didn't it send him there like the rest? He questioned. Bring him over here first, Gradier Zanatus commanded. The supervisor nodded and grabbed hold of Gustav's left arm. Gustav was alarmed by the sudden grip, but the supervisor leaped upwards towards the southeast area before he could react to it. Sonnen. Gustav traveled across the air along with the supervisor, and before he knew it, they were closing in on a glass wall. Gustav placed his right arm in front of himself in defense as they arrived in front of the glass. However, to his surprise, there was no collision when they made contact. Instead, their body phased through it. Intangibility. Gustav immediately recognized this bloodline ability. It was one of the rarest bloodlines in the history of mixed bloods. Plop. They landed within the small room, and Gustav looked around. He noticed Gradier Zanatus standing among the weird-looking supervisors. Sir Zanatus, I've brought him, the other male supervisor with gray-colored hair voiced out. Good. Welcome, candidate 00126, Gradier Zanatus voiced out. Gustav just stared in response. He was more concerned with the words that were going to come out of Gradier Zanatus' mouth next, and how he would counter them if they happened to be unfavorable. It would seem your mental defenses happen to be higher than what the pod can handle, so you can't be sent in with the others, Gradier Zanatus explained. So, what's going to happen now? Gustav asked with a calm look. Well, this pod happens to be at the right level for your age group, so it's either you're way older or you're just different. Gradier Zanatus said, Can't I just use a higher level pod? Gustav asked, Well, you see, there are 4 levels of brain inducer pods. The pod you and your fellow participants used is at the beginner level, which is the first. The second level isn't what normal participants can handle since their brain functions might be overworked. As for the third and fourth levels, let's not even go there. You will be turned into a vegetable, Gradier Zanatus explained. Why don't we try the second level pod? Gustav asked once again. If we use a higher level pod to send you in, it would be a violation because it's for the age group of 30. Also, it will make it more difficult for you to differentiate between illusion and reality. The whole process would be quite unfair, since the other participants will have it easier. Only special class candidates can handle it at your age, Gradier Zanatus replied. Special class? Those words caught Gustav's interest. This means I'm in the safe zone, since there's a set of my age group that can handle it. This made Gustav calm down. His previous worries disappeared after he realized this. Let's try it, Gustav proposed. The supervisor stared at Gustav with a weird look after hearing that. The supervisor with rhino horns on his forehead replied Gustav before anyone else could. Listen here, kid, without authorization, we can't put you in that pod, so forget it. Your case will have to be reported to the higher-ups, and you will have to wait for their next set of instructions. Chapter 190. The supervisor with rhino horns on his forehead replied Gustav before anyone else could. Listen here, kid, without authorization, we can't put you in that pod, so forget it. Your case will just have to be reported to the higher-ups, and you will have to wait for their next set of instructions. And how long would that take? Will I be able to take part in the next phase? Gustav asked. You will have to forget about continuing the MBO entrance test till after their feedback, so you won't be joining the next phase. You're no longer a part of the MBO entrance test, as from this MO. Before the supervisor could complete his statement, Gradier's Anatus interrupted. Prepare the stage 2 pod. He voiced out with an authoritative tone. The other supervisors turned around to stare at Gradier's Anatus after he gave that order. But we haven't been given authorization, the supervisor with gray hair voiced out. I'm giving the authorization. I will handle whatever comes next myself, Gradier's Anatus replied while walking towards Gustav. Sir's Anatus, what are you talking about? Are you sure about this? Punishments will be meted out if anything happens to this candidate because of your decision. The supervisor with rhino horn voiced out. Do as I have said, prepare the stage 2 pod, Gradier's Anatus replied with a condescending tone. Immediately, they heard the tone of his voice. None of the supervisors questioned him anymore. The supervisor with rhino horns backed down and moved to the side. Why? Gustav asked while staring at Gradier's Anatus, who was currently standing in front of him. Gradier's Anatus placed his right palm on Gustav's right shoulder before answering, I've been watching you. Let's see if you'll live up to my expectations. Gustav furrowed his eyebrows upon hearing that, and didn't respond. I can only hope this level of the pod will be high enough to transport my consciousness into that world. It's going to be a hassle to wait for feedback from the higher-ups, Gustav said internally as they waited. In about 2 minutes, some people in lab coats with weird-looking rhombus-like helmets covering their faces came into the small room, pushing a white pod. This pod was almost twice the size of the ones in the large hall in front. They started setting it up with a connected device, and in a few seconds, it powered up. TSSHHH. It slid open, and Gustav went in. The pod closed up back as he laid down inside. Has it been successfully connected to the furry world? Gradier's Anatus asked the people in lab coats. They gave an affirmative reply and stared at the pod, which was currently glowing up. Red bars appeared on it like the others and started filling up. Work this time, please, Gustav said internally. This was the first time he wished one of his stats was lesser than it currently was. The bar filled up completely, and just like before, Gustav felt his consciousness being pulled out of his body. Host brain waves are being manipulated by external forces. Mental fortitude needed for blocking brain manipulation. 50. A host has acquired enough mental fortitude to hindering brain manipulation. No, not again, Gustav said internally with a look of frustration as he saw the system notifications. The system was about to hinder brain manipulation again. Hey, system. I'm sure you can hear me. It wouldn't be sensible for me to stand out beyond this because it might cause future and unknown complications. If you could just let this machine do what it's made for, that would be the best, Gustav said, internally hoping that the system would listen to him. Host has acquired enough mental fortitude to hindering brain manipulation. He noticed that the notification paused here because there was still supposed to be another notification after this. He felt maybe the system decided to listen to him. Still, in the next second, a notification popped up above other notifications. The existence of the system shall not be exposed. I shall not tolerate entry of external forces into the host's mind. The system finally chatted with him again after several months. Listen to me. If we go beyond this, it might put us in a compromising situation. If I'm in a compromising situation, it means you also are, Gustav replied internally. If you get in a compromising situation and die, it doesn't affect me. I can always choose another host. The system responded coldly. I'm calling your bluff. After spending 6 months within me, there's no way you'd want to start from scratch, Gustav said internally without a look of worry. Do you pride yourself on being important now? How about we stop arguing and make a decision before the supervisors get too suspicious? Just listen to my suggestion, Gustav proposed. All right, go on. From what I've noticed, you don't want them peeking in my head. This machine can do that, but it isn't really trying to do that now. So, the best course of action would be for you to reduce my mental fortitude below 50 for it to send my consciousness to where the third phase is happening. Immediately I'm in, let my stats return to normal. That way, even if the machine tries to pick my brain when I'm in, it wouldn't work since my mental fortitude has returned back to normal. Also, I want to be pulled out of the world since the machine only needs to send us there. It plays no role in keeping us within that world. It's like a gateway. So returning my mental fortitude stats, normal will not pull me out of that world unless I find the exit, Gustav explained lengthily to the system. Doesn't seem like a bad suggestion, but with all that intelligence, you could only come up with this? I'm quite disappointed, Gustav. The system is still a bitch outside the pod. The supervisors started to get worried when they saw that the bar remained red even after filling up. Chapter 191. Outside the pod. The supervisors started to get worried when they saw that the bar remained red even after filling up. What's going on? Why hasn't it sent him? They're like the rest. The supervisor with worm-like hairs asked the people on lab coats. It would seem this candidate has a very high mental resistance, one of them replied. What? There's no way in hell he is supposed to be able to resist a brain inducer of this level. The supervisor with the rhino horns voiced out. We don't know, but the machine seems to be having trouble sending his consciousness there. That's the only reason we can come up with. Another one of them answered again. It must be dysfunctional then. While they were arguing, Gradier's Anatus stared at the pod with a confounded look, him being able to resist this. Not even special class candidates can do this. What is he? While everyone was in their thoughts of confusion, the bar suddenly turned green. Everyone stared at the pod and sighed in relief a second after. Looks like he wasn't able to resist it in the end, Gradier's Anatus said, internally. Check if his brain waves are okay. Any sign of irregularity? Gradier's Anatus asked. Truin, a holographic scan of Gustav's brain appeared in midair. He's perfectly fine, one of the people on lab coats voiced out. Gustav found himself inside the same world he saw on the holographic projection within the small room where the supervisor stayed. As far as his eyes could see, everywhere was set ablaze. The ground, the mountain, the trees, the skies, the birds, they all blazed with yellow and green fire. In front of him was a path also laced with fire. Gustav was standing on fire, but surprisingly he didn't feel hot or uncomfortable in any way. Still, to walk ahead, one would also have to walk on a path of fire. Parts of this projection is an illusion, and parts of it are also real. Walking on the wrong side of the ground will get a person burnt, Gustav said internally. He immediately figured out that he was probably stepping on the illusionary part of the fire. However, once he started walking, he would need to watch out for the real parts so he wouldn't get burnt. This will be fun, Gustav smirked. Just as he was about to take a step forward, the system messaged him. I shall now return your stats back to normal. Before Gustav could react to that, he noticed his vision changing. Things became clearer, and in a matter of seconds, most of the fire around him had turned transparent. He looked down and noticed that he was standing on transparent yellow and green fire. Some parts of the path ahead of him still had a normal-looking green and yellow fire burning on the ground, while others were transparent. No one needed to tell Gustav before he figured out that the transparent fires were illusionary, while the normal ones were real. Sigh. So much for having fun, Gustav said internally as he began to walk forward. He thought this was going to be a little challenging, but with his stats returning to normal, He saw through everything. I guess I should just go find the exit now, Gustav muttered while dashing forward. Dash has been activated, swoosh. He moved across the blazing grounds with speed. Sometimes he was on the left, and other times he would move to the right. He got in 30 minutes after the rest of the participants. Shouldn't we give him a little more time? The supervisor with gray hair questioned while staring at the timer on the top right corner of the room. He won't be needing that, Gradius Anatus replied, and pointed at a particular part of the split screens where Gustav could be seen dashing across a blazing field. Dash, what in the world? Dash, he's accurately dodging all the real fires and running through the illusionary fires? The supervisors were gobsmacked when they saw him. The large holographic projection had thousands of split screens based on the number of the participants, so they hadn't seen Gustav earlier. Nevertheless, Gradius Anatus could spot Gustav the instant his consciousness got tossed into that world. Other participants showcased on the screens were moving quite slowly because it wasn't easy to differentiate between reality and illusion. If they were hasty, their virtual body made from their consciousness would be burnt to ashes. It was just like a game. If their bodies were burnt to ashes, they would respawn several thousand feet behind from where their bodies burnt, and this would waste more of their time. In 30 minutes, more than 100 participants had been burnt to ashes once or twice and had to do it over. Since the use of bloodline abilities was allowed, some had gotten ahead of others since their ability made it easy for them to scale through the region of blazing grounds. However, the ground wasn't the only thing within this world to worry about. The participants would find out the hard way that other things would give them difficulty. Even their ability wouldn't give them an easy pass when they encounter such situations. Gustav kept running across the field, dodging the fires. When he got to a particular point, he could see different participants moving ahead slowly. They heard the sound of the wind behind and turned around with a look of surprise. Dash, what is he doing? Dash, doesn't he know that he shouldn't be moving so quickly around here? There were about 6 of them within the vicinity. The participants looked like they formed some kind of group as they slowly moved forward after studying a particular area properly. Hey, you're going to get roasted if you keep moving forward like that, one of them voiced out as Gustav closed in on them. They happened to be passing the only part that was blazing with illusionary fire at the moment, so Gustav had to slow down and move according to their speed. Chapter 192. They happened to be passing the only part that was blazing with illusionary fire at the moment, so Gustav had to slow down and move according to their speed. Gustav would have to wait till they got to a part of the land with more illusionary fires, so he would be able to take another path and not be disturbed by their speed. Mind your business, Gustav replied the person in front of him that had just spoken. What? Then why are you following us? The person who happened to be a guy with red hair voiced out. This is the only safe path at the moment. When we go further, you won't see me behind you anymore, Gustav replied as he continued walking forward. You. Before the participant could retort, something happened. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The blazing clouds suddenly started falling from the sky. What the? They were all shocked by the blazing clouds falling from the sky. They were blazing with such intense yellow and green fire, increasing the temperature surrounding the environment. The clouds falling were enormous, so there was no way they'd be able to move fast or far enough to escape from the area of concentration. It was also too fast for them to observe and determine which parts were illusionary, so the participants began to panic. They were only about a few hundred feet more from reaching the point where Gustav would be able to move on his own. Move forward, you idiots, Gustav voiced out. His voice brought them out of their reverie. The group subconsciously started running forward, even though they knew that they wouldn't escape the range of fire. After getting to the end of the path, Gustav could see transparent yellow and green fires on the far right side and the left side. By contrast, the middle had real fires blazing from the ground. Gustav immediately dashed towards the left and started running forward. The others couldn't catch up to his speed, but they still tried following in his steps due to him being at the front suddenly. While the clouds fell, Gustav moved from place to place. Swerve, swerve, swerve. Some large chunks of cloud fell on him, but he was unscathed. However, he totally avoided some while still running forward, but they were still dropping. Some participants behind him had been smoked to death by the falling clouds of blazing yellow and blue fire. Gustav looked up and noticed a large cloud coated in fire dropping. Its size would occupy a radius of over 100 feet, and it happened to be real and not illusionary. Gustav turned towards the right and leaped forward. Swoosh! His body traveled across the air, and he landed on the other path of fire that was illusionary. Only one person among the group he met earlier could react in time and activate their bloodline. Black tentacles protruded out of his legs. The tentacles made contact with the ground, pushing his entire body into the air, flying towards the same lane Gustav landed on after jumping. Boom! The cloud landed on the left side after he jumped away. The participants he formed a team with were all burnt to ashes. That was the last of the falling clouds. Everything had gone back to normal after the large cloud landed, even though nothing was normal about the place. Huff, huff, huff. The male participant turned around, stared at the side while breathing profusely. Even though this was a virtual world and the participants had a virtual body, everything was the same as reality when it came to their anatomy. They could use their bloodline ability, exert their strength, stamina, and everything else related to their body, which was the same in the real world. The male participant noticed that everyone had been turned to ash except himself and Gustav. That was a close one. Does it mean that this guy knows how to easily differentiate the originals from fake? He remembered the way Gustav was dodging some of the clouds earlier, and the fact that he could escape because he followed Gustav's movement. Hey, why don't we work together? He turned back around to voice out, but couldn't find Gustav in the surroundings. Where did he go? The male participant voiced out while looking around. Gustav had already crossed another 2,000 feet, while the other guy behind him was busy checking out his surroundings. What was ahead of him now was a blazing forest of very tall trees. He noticed something and activated God's eyes to zoom in his sight on the forest that was still more than 2,000 feet away. Whoa, that's a lot of red wasps. Gustav could see a swarm of glowing red wasps covering the outer area of the forest. These wasps were mixed breeds also. They had mutated and become different from normal wasps. They were known as the V-red wasps. Each one was the size of an adult index finger, and Gustav could see well over 10,000 of them. One sting from them was said to cause temporary paralysis. 2 would petrify the mind and the body, while the third one would cause the body to explode into blood and gore. It would seem the participants that needed to enter the forest would have to go through the sea of wasps first. The first thing Gustav noticed was some of the wasps were illusionary. Inside the room where the supervisors were watching the participants, Great Ears and Adis would occasionally say 1 or 2 things about the performance of promising participants. Most of the time, Gustav would always pop up. The only problem with candidate 00126 would be the fact that he doesn't seem to play nice with others. Great Ears and Adis said while staring at one of the screens where Gustav could be seen headed for the forest border, where swarms of wasps stood guard. He totally would have ignored that group of people if the surroundings weren't blazing with real fire. The female supervisor with blue facial hairs muttered. Exactly. He doesn't seem to like working with others just like his brother. Great Ears and Adis replied. The faces of the rest of the supervisors showed confusion after hearing that. His brother? They voiced out together. Chapter 193. Exactly. He doesn't seem to like working with others just like his brother. Great Ears and Adis replied. The faces of the rest of the supervisors showed confusion after hearing that. His brother? They voiced out together. Yes, his brother, Gradius Anatus replied. The supervisors' faces still showed confusion, but in the next second, it turned to shock. Candidate 00126 is the elder brother of Endrik Oslov, Gradius Anatus revealed. What? Their eyes bulged out in surprise, and they turned to stare at the holographic screen in midair. After staring at Gustav repeatedly, they finally saw the resemblance between him and Endrik. How is this? Wasn't his brother supposed to be a lot weaker than this? One of the supervisors asked. When he was discovered, the higher-ups investigated the Oslovs to find out if there was anyone with potential like that of Endrik's. He was said to be a mixed blood below the rank of F. So they immediately lost interest and only focused on Endrik, Gradius Anatus explained. Then how? The supervisor with rhino horns asked with a disbelieving expression. There lies the mystery. I'm sure they must have noticed it too, Gradius Anatus said with a smile. Within the furry world, the participants still moved about looking for the exit. It had been almost an hour since the third phase started. As expected, no one had found the exit yet. Swoosh! Angie dashed across a burning mountain region. Surprisingly, she didn't have to dodge any of the blazing grounds because at her current speed, she was able to dash through real fire without getting burnt. The fire would only be able to come in contact with her afterimage and not her physical form. Of course, since everywhere was blazing, she would still need to stop somewhere sooner or later to rest. Resting meant that she would have to look around for a place blazing with illusionary fire before pausing. However, at the moment, she still had a lot of energy, so she hasn't stopped for a break since the beginning of this test phase. Shrew, shrew, shrew. Currently, she was being chased by small furry-like beings coated in fire. There were more than 1,000 furry-like beings following her as she descended from the blazing mountain. These beings looked like a combination of rabbits, bunnies, and squirrels. These creatures were small, but their eyes were glowing red as they chased after Angie with intensity. Angie had managed to pass through 3 regions since she started racing through the blazing world, and she met with different situations. One of them was where 2 silver glowing gateways suddenly appeared when she was running up the mountain. Each gateway was more than 700 feet in height. She suspected one to be a real gateway leading to the exit of the furry world. At the same time, she believed the other was illusionary. She wanted to study both gateways before making her decision to travel through one of them. Still, for every second that passed, both gateways were getting dimmer and dimmer. She had to make her choice before observing properly and ended up going through the wrong gateway. Immediately she went through it. She came out on the other side. However, she wasn't alone. These creatures started coming out in multitudes chasing after her like they had a personal vendetta with her. She was able to outrun them in speed, but they were slowly catching up to her surprise. The more they ran, the more the fire on the bodies of these creatures kept increasing. Angie turned her head to the side toe check on the creatures chasing her from behind and noticed that whenever they passed on a particular part of the ground, the fire on their bodies would brighten up a little bit more. It didn't happen all the time. Neither was it a substantial increase, but she had been checking from time to time. So this time she was sure it happened again. Does it have something to do with them making contacts with the parts of the ground that has a real fire? Angie contemplated internally. She believed this was the only plausible explanation for their increase in stamina and speed. Angie knew that they would only get faster as time passed, while she would get weaker because she didn't have infinite energy. So she started formulating a plan in her mind. Gustav always says to use misfortune to my advantage. What would he do in this situation? Birrar, 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 vrhh, vrhh, vrhh. This is why I need to keep avoiding more groups, Gustav said internally as he dashed through the forest whilst being chased by a swarm of red wasps. Swoosh, swoosh. He dashed across the place, dodging lots of long trees blazing with fire along the way. He would have liked to climb a tree and use one of its branches to catapult himself forward from tree to tree, since this would make him faster. However, every tree here was blazing with flames. Both illusionary and real trees had blazing green and yellow flames on them. Earlier on, when Gustav was about to enter the forest, he had to go around it. This is because the direction he was coming from had real V-Red wasps positioned in front of it. While Gustav was circling towards the right, he met a group of participants moving head-on towards the real wasps. Gustav managed to pass them the moment one of them used his bloodline ability to attack the swarm up ahead. Idiot! This was the first word Gustav shouted out as the swarm of wasps came flying angrily towards him and the group. Gustav and the rest of them went their separate ways, causing the swarm to split. Still, even with that, more than 1,000 wasps chased after Gustav. This is because Gustav happened to be closer to the person who attacked the swarm, and he was also running at that moment. The swarm chased after him towards the position he planned on entering the forest from. Chapter 194. The Unforgiving V. A sea of illusionary wasps was stationed in front, which was why the wasps chasing felt even more confident. However, when Gustav entered into this sea of wasps, to their disappointment, nothing happened to Gustav. Nevertheless, they kept chasing him even after he went in. They were relentless in chasing after him. Their numbers hadn't dropped since the start, and they were somehow able to keep up with Gustav's speed since he currently wasn't making use of the dash. Gustav didn't want to attack them because of their numbers, which were well over 1,000. Their bodies cast a shadow over him from behind. If he was to attack so many at a time without getting scathed, he would need to use some other bloodline ability and not just brute strength alone. Gustav turned his head to the side to stare at the back when he sensed something. VRHH, BRHH, VRHH, BRHH. The wasps suddenly started merging with one another. They can do this too? Gustav was surprised at the sudden merging that was happening behind him. With each merge, the wasp group would become larger. Looks like I have to increase my speed, Gustav said internally and activated dash. Dash has been activated, swoosh. Gustav's speed instantly increased by 30 points as he moved speedily across the place, increasing the gap between him and the wasps by a lot. In a few seconds, he had left the swarm in the dust. He had given them so much distance that they couldn't be seen behind him anymore. Swoosh! Gustav moved zigzag across the forest, dodging a number of densely packed, blazing trees up ahead. Dash has been deactivated. Troyan! Just after Dash was deactivated, a flash of bright light suddenly appeared on Gustav's west. It was several hundred meters away from his current position. Just as Gustav turned to the side to start moving in that direction, he sensed something headed for him with super speed. Tum! He instantly jumped backward as a red silhouette streak passed his front. Sway! Bang! A gigantic-looking red wasp slammed into the trees in front of Gustav, bringing them down in the process. SKRYHH. It screeched loudly and came to a slight pause after slamming into those trees. It was as large as a small pickup truck, and its wings were wider than a tree full of branches and leaves. In the next second, it started beating its wings furiously again, stirring up an immense amount of wind. Swim! It dashed towards Gustav on the side, while opening its mouth wide in a bid to swallow him whole. What the... Gustav had already activated Dash, but the wasp's sudden acceleration came as a surprise, and he couldn't get away in time. Gustav crossed his arms while swinging the right one up and the left one down. Bam! The creature slammed into him, and both of them went flying several hundred feet backward, smashing into numerous trees on the path. Bang! 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 A trail of destruction was left due to the collisions. The large wasp looked like it was struggling with something as it kept wriggling and beating its wings. On a closer look, The wasp's upper and lower mouth had been grabbed by Gustav, and he happened to be pushing them upwards and downwards, causing a separation. The mouth of the creature was left open due to Gustav's intense grip. There was a trail of his legs on the ground, which proved that he had been sliding backward since the collision between him and the wasp. However, now his legs were firmly pinned to the ground. There was a small heap of sand behind both feet. The wasp tried pulling itself from Gustav's grip by beating its wings, but its efforts were futile. His muscles bulged intensely, causing his sleeves to tear. "Grhh!" Gustav groaned as he forcefully lifted the massive creature and threw it behind him. Bang, 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 bang. The wasp screeched in pain as they kept slamming into the trees. Its body traveled backward with intensity due to Gustav's throw. Gustav didn't wait for a second more before dashing in the direction of the bright lights that appeared earlier. He couldn't help but think that it was more important than dealing with the meddlesome and large wasp. Why did it seem so weak? Shouldn't the combination of thousands of them be stronger than that? Gustav wondered. The moment he crossed 1,000 feet, he understood why. He could already see 2 silver glowing gateways in the distance. Gustav instantly figured out that one of them must be a gateway. However, he felt 2 fast objects approaching from behind. Swinnen, swinnen. In the next second, they caught up to him, and Gustav saw that they looked exactly like the large wasp that he faced a few moments back. Of course, there was more than one, Gustav said internally, while jumping towards the right to dodge the first one that lunged at him. The second one also came after him, from behind. Swoosh, thump. Gustav did a flip in midair and landed on the back of the second one after it lunged forward. He reached out both his hands to grab onto both wings and pulled them with intensity. "Schhrhh, splurt, skrrych." The wasp screeched in pain as both wings were uprooted from its back, and black blood came spurting out like a fountain due to the loss of its wings. The wasp descended towards some trees in front. Gustav leaped off the wasp as its head slammed into the trees. While his body was still in midair, the other wasp lunged towards his descending body. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Gustav's body suddenly descended with speed, causing the humongous wasp to miss him. Gustav landed on his feet, and the wasp came to a stop after moving several hundred feet forward. Just as Gustav wanted to engage it again, he noticed that the gateways that appeared on his west were dimming. They had been dimming for a while now, but since he was engaging the wasps, he didn't realize it until now. Chapter 195. Swan, swoosh. Both Gustav and the wasp dashed out at the same time towards each other. Just as they were about to collide again, Gustav suddenly turned towards the left. Sprint has been activated. Swoosh. The wasp passed behind him as he turned to the side, and he dashed forward with intense speed. Zwee, 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 zwee. He dodged trees as he moved towards the gateways up ahead. The wasp, noticing that it missed its target, turned around and started chasing after Gustav. After moving forward for a bit, Gustav started using his sprint, so the gap between him and the wasp increased significantly. Thump. Gustav leapt from the ground and landed on a blazing branch of a tree several hundred feet away. Why? Immediately his feet made contact with the branch. It bent to its limit before swinging his entire body upwards with force. Due to Gustav's speed, the fire could not hurt him, since his body only made contact for less than a second. Swoosh! Gustav's body traveled in midair towards the gateway on the left. Both gateways were almost faded completely, but he could still see the difference between both gateways. Both were already getting transparent as their light faded, but the right one was more transparent than the left. Thwoosh! Gustav's body was about 70 feet away when the first wasp he dealt with suddenly appeared out of nowhere. This was the same wasp he threw away the other time. It was waiting for me here? Gustav said internally as he stared at the wasp approaching from underneath. The wasps were able to accelerate at immense speed, and this one had been waiting for him to get here. So it could attack. So contact was practically impossible. A moment pause will make me miss the gateway, Gustav reckoned. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Gustav's body suddenly became a lot lighter, causing him to stop descending as he traveled in midair. Swia. He spun his body, missing the mouth of the wasp, and appearing above its head. Gravitational displacement has been deactivated. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. Dash 800 p. Gustav landed on its head and squatted a bit before pushing himself forward. Thwum. His body blurred and appeared in front of the gateway instantly before disappearing into it. The large wasp body descended from the air with speed due to the intense push from Gustav's legs. Bang! It slammed into the ground, creating a small pool as blood burst out of its body. Skkryych. It screeched out in pain as both gateways disappeared. Gustav opened his eyes and found himself back in the pod. Tshhh. The pod slid open, causing a small amount of gas to escape through it. Gustav could see the shocked faces of the supervisors, especially the rhino-horned one that he sensed hostility from earlier on. Welcome back. Great Ears and Natus smiled while speaking. Back in the furry world, lots of participants had seen gateways appear in different regions. Still, due to both gateways looking exactly the same, not a single one of them had managed to pick the right one. These gateways would just appear randomly, and whenever they went through the wrong gateway, small, sinister-looking creatures with furs would appear to chase after the person that went through it. These creatures looked like a mixture of rabbits, bunnies, and squirrels. However, they looked a lot more menacing with red glowing eyes. They would never stop chasing their prey until they had got them and devoured their entire body till there was nothing left. After this, the participant would respawn thousands of feet behind where they had fallen and start traveling forward once again. At least 200 participants had fallen to this, and not a single one of them had been able to outrun these creatures, because the farther they pursued, the faster they became. At the moment, only one person had managed to outrun the creatures for so long, and that was Angie. Angie had run down from the mountain she was being chased on earlier. She was now running on a path that was in the middle of two large mountains. The path was also blazing with green and yellow fire. Numerous numbers of furry-like creatures chased after her from behind. Thwoosh! Angie was currently moving at a speed that couldn't be followed with the naked eyes. Yet the creatures were able to keep up with her. Looks like it's time for me to use it, Angie said internally as her eyes' color suddenly changed to silver. A third horn suddenly sprouted from her forehead. Kid, how did you do it? The rhino-horned supervisor asked with a look of confusion. Gustav shrugged his shoulders and climbed out of the pod. You went in there later than everyone, but still came out earlier, he added with a suspicious gaze. What's wrong with that? Gustav asked with an undisturbed expression. You are... He was about to continue when the people on lab coats and helmets interrupted. Now, Sir Nolan, we have to run tests for any abnormalities within his brain. So please refrain from disturbing him. The supervisor with the rhino horn backed down after hearing that. Still, he stared at Gustav with a suspicious look. The other supervisors were just as astonished. They watched as the people in lab coat placed two circular objects on the side of Gustav's head. A diagram appeared in front of them, and they checked it out for a few minutes before taking the button off his head. He's perfectly fine. There's not a single sign of brain strain, one of them voiced out before proceeding to leave the room with the others. What the... Not even the special class candidates can make use of this pod without suffering one temporary brain strain or the other, the male supervisor with worm-like hairs said with a look of astonishment. The supervisors couldn't count how many times they had been wowed by Gustav's feats in the last 30 minutes. Chapter 196. The supervisors couldn't count how many times they had been astonished by Gustav's feats in the last 30 minutes. When they watched his battle with the wasps, they realized that he couldn't even be compared to his brother. Looks like the big brother is better than the little brother. But how? The female supervisor with blue facial hairs said with a surprised expression, "Looks like they already figured it out." Gustav said internally upon hearing that as he stared at the supervisors with a calm look. "I don't have a brother," he replied. "What do you mean by the?" The male supervisor that leapt through the glass earlier didn't get to finish his statement before Great Ears Anatus interrupted. "Now let's not bother the young lad. He passed the test, so he will be sent back to the waiting room on floor 602, he added. The other supervisors nodded in response. "You will meet others that pass the special test there. So please be nice," Great Ears Anatus said to Gustav. "I'll try," Gustav replied, while putting his arm in his pocket. Great Ears Anatus smiled and snapped his finger. Zing! A flash of bright light covered Gustav, and he disappeared in the next minute. "Have you all forgotten your tasks as supervisors of this branch test location?" Great Ears Anatus said with a solemn expression on his face. The supervisors showed a remorseful expression after hearing Great Ears Anatus reprimand them. Great Ears Anatus turned to stare at the holographic split screens after saying that. His eyes went from screen to screen, checking out different participants that were still undergoing the third phase. His eyes slightly widened as he noticed something. That girl. The other supervisors followed his line of sight and noticed the same. Gustav reappeared in a large hall where young adults in white clothing could be seen seated. They were all staring at the huge holographic projection in front before he arrived. Immediately Gustav arrived, everyone turned to the side to stare at him. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Dash, is that him? Dash, oh my. He looks so out of this world. Dash, he is crazily good-looking but also intimidating in person. Dash, I can't believe he passed the third phase in less than an hour. Amid the discussions about himself, Gustav walked forward gracefully, attracting everyone's attention even more. Some of the girls were blushing while staring at Gustav's extremely charming and confident looks. Most of the boys were feeling jealous, especially those that also graduated from Echelon Academy. They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that he was able to perform feats they couldn't, especially after remembering how he used to be the trash of Echelon Academy. The question all of them had on their minds at the moment was, what caused such a change? Gustav could see his former classmates seated at a particular spot together behind. "Losers will always stick together," he muttered with a look of disinterest. Yuhiko stared at him from her seating position, hoping he would throw her a glance or two. However, to her disappointment, Gustav didn't even bother looking in their direction. He moved towards the front and picked a seat there. The participants on that line only stared at him. Some wanted to initiate a conversation, but didn't know how to. "Oh, she seems to be using it," Gustav muttered while staring at the holographic projection displaying the participants within the furry world. On the top left corner of the projection, a whitish wave could be seen surrounding Angie's figure as she dashed across the place. The others within the room also noticed this part of the projection and wondered who she was. This is because they couldn't see her looks properly due to the whitish waves surrounding her. Angie had already passed the mountain regions in the furry world, and now she was running across a plain field. Fwumsh! Her body sliced through the air, generating massive gusts of wind due to her intense speed. The whitish waves surrounding her continued to increase in size as she ran. Her current speed was so fast that the creatures chasing behind her couldn't follow her speed a few seconds after she activated this form. She already left them in the dust. After running forward for one more minute, Angie performed a surprising action. She turned around and started running back in the direction she came from. This action surprised everyone that was watching. They wondered why she would be heading back in the direction of those creatures after escaping them. The whitish wave surrounding her had now covered a radius of more than 100 feet as she closed in on the thousands of furry-like creatures ahead. Grady Erzanatus and the other supervisors already had an idea of what she would do. Still, no one knew what her end goal was. Even Gustav had no idea of what her end goal was, even if he knew what she was planning at the moment. Angie closed in on the creatures, with the whitish wave surrounding her expanding more and more. The creatures already noticed her approach and crazily lunged towards her. Immediately, Angie arrived in front of them. They leapt upwards towards her. Angie kept running till she arrived in the midst of the thousands of creatures. They bared fangs and swung out their claws as they descended from the air upon her. "Release!" Angie voiced out. The creatures in midair suddenly felt a sense of crisis as their furs stood in fear, but it was too late. Shunum! The whitish wave that had been accumulating around her suddenly burst forth from her body, spreading across the surroundings. It slammed forcefully into the creatures within the vicinity, sending them flying into the distance with broken bones and disfigured looks. The whitish wave kept on spreading, disintegrating a lot of things in the surroundings until it covered a radius of more than 1,000 feet. By the time it finished blasting outwards from her body, only the bodies of the dead furry creatures could be seen in the vicinity. Piles upon piles of corpses, stacked up in one another, could be seen in different parts of the surroundings. Chapter 197. By the time it finished blasting outwards from her body, only the bodies of dead furry creatures could be seen in the vicinity. Piles upon piles of corpses stacked upon one another could be seen in different parts of the surroundings. Within the hall, everyone had their mouths wide open after witnessing what had just occurred. The environs were full of destruction. Angie could be seen standing in place while holding onto something underneath her left armpit. They couldn't understand how someone they gave so little attention, thinking she was ordinary, happened to be one of the most powerful participants. Even the supervisors were just as surprised. Grady Erzanatus had taken notice of Angie from the previous test and calculated that she had to be the fastest participant. However, speed was something that every mixed blood would have as long as they kept increasing in strength. So, he was hoping she would have something else up her sleeves. Now that he saw this, he had no doubt that Angie had potential. Looks like she is able to accumulate that whitish force when the kinetic energy generated from her speed reaches a particular level, Grady Erzanatus muttered with a look of delight. Also, from the looks of things, she can only discharge it while running. She seems to be in control of the ability to. Even though the kinetic energy can be accumulated to a particular amount, it's still a very good ability, the other female supervisor with black, flowing hair stated lengthily. She is a prodigy, the other male supervisor with worm-like hairs added. But what is her reason for grabbing hold of one of them? The supervisor with rhino horn on his forehead asked with an inquisitive look. The supervisor stared at the screen, where Angie could be seen holding onto one of the furry creatures. This particular one was still alive, unlike the rest in the vicinity. "I guess we shall see," Grady Erzanatus muttered. Within the furry world, Angie held on to one of the creatures that were chasing her earlier. This one was injured, and the fire that was initially on its body had gone out. Angie had grabbed onto this particular one when she was in their midst before she released the whitish wave of energy surrounding her. It stared at her with a timid look as she held onto it tightly. The red glowing eyes that looked intimidating earlier were now nowhere to be found. Angie turned around and started moving forward. Her third horn reduced in size and went back into her forehead after a few seconds. Towards her northeast was a plateau landscape. Swoosh! She moved speedily in that direction while holding on to the scared creature. This time she was making use of her normal speed. She was headed towards a particularly high ground area that was rectangular-shaped from her location. Of course, this high ground was also blazing with green and yellow fire, including the path that led to it. Angie ran for about 10 miles before reaching that particular high ground. Her reason for heading there was because she noticed a swarm of flies surrounding that particular high ground. On a closer look, they were wasps similar to the ones Gustav dealt with before finishing the test. Angie had also come into contact with these wasps when she was climbing up that mountain region earlier on. So, she had a feeling that these wasps were always in regions where a gateway would appear. She didn't plan on going back to that mountain region to wait for another gateway because she had already left that far behind. She made the right decision by not going back there because a gateway will never appear in that particular region again after a person went through the illusionary one. The regions that had V-Red wasps guarding them were where the illusionary and real gateways often appeared. Angie, once again, made the right decision by deciding to travel there. Angie ran from the bottom of the highland plateau across the diagonal surface that led to the top. It was only about 200 meters in height. Swoosh! She closed in on the top in a few seconds and could already see the wasps positioned at the top area. Sonnen! Her speed increased explosively, and she dashed through the sea of wasps, arriving at the top of the highland plateau. The wasps knew that a silhouette just streaked past them. Still, after looking around, they couldn't find anyone around the vicinity because Angie's speed was just too godlike for them to follow. She had already given them a gap of more than 3,000 feet after passing through their midst. Atop this highland, trees and plants of different kinds could be seen in the surroundings. Everything was still blazing with fire, so Angie didn't pause for a moment. The top of this highland was as large as a small island, and the temperature was really high. After a few seconds of running, Angie could see some participants in the distance. These participants were a group of 4 that didn't move from their position. They surrounded a small tree and stood in place. They looked like they were waiting for something. Angie decided not to approach them for now. Instead, she kept moving around the vicinity, checking for any abnormalities. She moved from place to place across the top of the highland for about 10 minutes. When she didn't notice anything, she started thinking that the gates weren't going to appear. Nevertheless, she kept circling around the top. After another 20 minutes went by, Angie was already thinking of leaving the region when a flash of bright silver light appeared towards the far east of her current position. Swoosh! Angie quickly dashed in that direction. In a few seconds, she arrived back at where she found those group of participants earlier. "Jack, have you figured out which one is the illusion?" One of the participants asked a boy in a full blue bodysuit. Chapter 198. No, we'll have to go through one of them also. After this, you'll have studied enough to figure out the difference, the boy in full blue bodysuit replied as they moved forward. "Do you still have enough juice to take us all on a jump?" One of them asked again, and the boy replied by nodding. Ahead of them were 2 glowing silver gateways. It would seem these participants could pinpoint the location where the gateways appeared from their conversation. Angie already deduced that they planned on entering one of the gateways blindly. Swoosh! She quickly dashed forward and arrived in front of the group. The group paused their movement and stared at her with suspicious gazes. She finally placed the furry creature that had been in her arms all this time on the ground several feet in front of the 2 gateways. "Hey, who the hell are you? Get out of our way!" A girl in a pink outfit shouted out. Angie turned around and stared at them. "If you want to finish the test now, you can follow me," Angie said and proceeded to look forward again. "Hey, you, why would we follow you?" The girl behind shouted out again, but Angie ignored her and focused on the furry creature she placed on the ground. The creature's body erupted in flames once again as it started moving forward towards the gateway on the right. The participants behind were about to attack Angie so she could get out of the way. Immediately, Angie determined that the furry creature was moving towards the gateway on the right. She dashed towards the gateway on the left. They were surprised at her sudden action and were unable to react until she arrived in front of the gateway on the left. "Dash, stop her!" Dash, she's going to ruin everything. Despite their shouting, no one was fast enough to stop her. The boy in full blue bodysuit disappeared and reappeared in front of the gateway, but it was too late. Angie had gone right through it. The furry creature she put on the ground was still moving forward towards the gateway on the left. Both gateways were already starting to dim. "Come on, we have to get out of here," the boy in full blue bodysuit shouted out. The rest of the group ran forward to meet him, but that was when they noticed something. "Dash, guys, those creatures haven't come out." Dash, also that girl didn't appear on the other side after going through the gateway. Dash, she immediately disappeared after going through this gateway. They all turned to stare at the furry creature that was still moving towards the gateway on the right. They recognized it as one of the creatures that constantly flooded out of the illusionary gateways. That means this particular gateway is real. They realized this in the next moment. With no further ado, the group quickly went through the gateway. Within the hall, where lots of pods were situated, a few pods opened up in different parts of the large room. TSSHHH, TSSHHH, TSSHHH. At the same time Angie finished, some other participants also finished alongside her. The group she left behind also awoke several seconds after she did. They climbed out of their pods and stared at the glass wall above on the east side of the hall. "Congratulations on passing the third phase. You shall now be transported to the waiting room." Great Ears and Ada's voice reverberated across the room before the participants all disappeared with a flash of bright light. "That was a really smart move, candidate 00121, Great Ears and Ada said as he stared at the hall through the glass wall for a few seconds before turning to face the holographic projection once again. "Let's see what the others have in store." Within the hall on floor 602, about 7 participants appeared. Angie was among the 7, as well as Glade, the green-skinned girl. They didn't see each other when they were in the hall earlier. Still, they noticed one another the instant they appeared within the hall. "I see you're also among the ones who finished first again," Glade said with a smile. "The same could be said about you," Angie replied with a smile as they walked towards the sitting area. The group that followed after Angie, when she went into the gateway, approached her. "We're sorry for earlier." They apologized for almost attacking her, and also thanked her for her help. Angie, of course, held no grudge towards them and smiled dismissively when they apologized. "What of Gustav? He didn't get finished yet?" Glade asked as they approached the sitting area. "He's over there." Angie pointed at the front where Gustav was in the sitting area, crossing his legs with his face turned towards the side. "He didn't arrive with us." "That means he was first again?" Glade voiced out with a bewildered expression. "Naturally, hi. Angie giggled sweetly after replying as they walked towards Gustav's seating position. The participants that had just arrived were feeling intimidated at the sight of the people on white. They recognized some of them and instantly realized that this must be the batch from different schools within the city that passed the special test. Some of them didn't even have the guts to sit on the same row with them and proceeded to find an unoccupied row. However, Gustav, Angie, and Glade didn't even bother about that. They were currently seated together at the front, where these students packed themselves. They didn't look disturbed or intimidated in any way. In fact, those sitting beside them were the ones who looked intimidated. "You did well." Angie, Gustav praised her with a smile. No, it was nothing. Compared to you, I'm still lacking." Angie replied with a bashful expression. "Don't sell yourself short," Gustav said once again while turning to stare at her. Angie's ears turned red as she noticed his glance. Are they like a couple, or what? Glade was starting to feel like the third wheel around them. "How did you think of using that creature as a means of differentiating between the real and fake gateway?" Gustav asked with a look of amazement. Chapter 199. How did you think of using that creature as a means of differentiating between the real and fake gateway? Gustav asked with a look of amazement. Angie stared at Gustav's face, and her ears turned red as she moved her face towards the front to avoid eye contact. I only thought of what you would do in that situation, and the idea came to me, she muttered with a bashful look as her face turned even redder than before. Glade heard that and sneakily took glances at Angie from the side. She's tripping hard, Glade said internally before staring at Gustav from the side. With the reaction I'm seeing, he doesn't seem interested in things like that. Poor girl, Glade said internally with a look of pity. She was already fond of Angie because of her kindness, so she sympathized with her. That looked like something I could think of doing, but you deserve all the praise for coming up with something like that on your own. Well done, Angie. Gustav praised her once again. Wow, the idiot has no idea. Huh? Just how much of a dummy is he not to notice? Glade secretly cussed at Gustav for his cluelessness. Even if he did know, I don't think he'll act on it. He seems like he's very focused. His reason for joining the MBO is probably keeping all other things from causing a distraction for him. I think she also noticed this. Maybe that's why she never revealed it to him, Glade analyzed while watching the both of them discuss. Angie had made use of the furry creature because she noticed that they could sense their kind. The furry world was virtual, but it had certain real aspects, including the illusionary gateway leading to where the furry creatures were located. Her reason for placing the furry creature she took hostage after using her special ability was to use it in figuring out which gateway it was real. The creature was terrified of her, so the moment she placed it in front of the gateways, it immediately started scrambling towards the gateway that led to its kin. Angie instantly figured out that the other gateway was the real one. Gustav didn't come into contact with these creatures, so he had no idea that this was the case. He praised Angie again. He was genuinely proud of her because her new ability was unlocked when they were training weeks back. Not only did she use her ability properly, but she also made use of her brain to find a way out. Glade looked around the hall, and she could see the people around them stealing glances at Gustav and Angie occasionally. She could understand them staring at Gustav like that since he was pretty much the strongest participant in the hall. She also had no doubt that his strength rivaled even that of the students that passed the special test. Still, she couldn't understand why they were also staring at Angie in that manner. She had no idea the feats Angie had performed before passing the test. At the moment, it had been 2 hours since the test began. Only 4 hours were remaining before the ending of the current test, so the participants that had passed had to keep waiting. The students that passed the special test could leave the waiting room at any time to walk around the floor, but the participants that had just arrived were not authorized to. As they waited, the population in the hall was slowly starting to increase. Every 30 minutes, about 10 to 15 participants would appear within the hall with a weary look. The more a person remained in the pod connected to the furry world, the more mentally strained they become. This was the reason why the participants looked fatigued. Gustav's mind wandered back to several weeks back as they waited. After Gustav saw Anu, the dark-skinned new guy who was supposed to be in charge of the cooking equipment that exploded, he decided to do research about him in the lab. That same day, when he saw Anu with Mr. Lon, he overheard their conversation within one of the offices. "I must say, you really did a fantastic job handling the kitchen incident, Mr. Eben." Mr. Lon's first statement confirmed Gustav's suspicions. "Ha! It was a piece of cake for me. All that was needed was the connections and right scenarios to fool that old man into hiring me," Gustav could hear Anu reply. However, at this moment, he already understood that Anu wasn't his real name. Instead, it was Ebunalua. Your cloning bloodline really came in handy. It was really perfect to the extent that no one could tell that it was an artificial corpse, Mr. Lon added. "Ha! Thanks, Mr. Lon, but perfecting my clone for that mission cost me quite a sum since I had to use materials from the lab," Eben said once again. "Of course I have your payment here. That old man was really sickening for trying to side with a trash mixed blood. You did a good job getting him out of the way in the most degrading manner possible." "Ha ha ha! A chef that will never be given the opportunity to set foot in the kitchen for the rest of his life. Hearing Mr. Lon's laughter, Gustav felt an intense urge to kick the door open and murder him in the most gruesome way possible, but he held himself back. It's not time yet. When the time is right, it'll make them all pay. Gustav swore within himself and proceeded to keep listening till their meeting was over. After Mr. Lon left, Gustav stuck around the laboratory for a bit and asked about Eben. He confirmed that Eben truly had a bloodline that let him split himself into two and create a clone from one half of his body. This was exactly how they were fooled by the corpse that was found in the kitchen. Eben sabotaged the kitchen equipment and used his clone to fool them, so there won't be anything tying him to the case. Chapter 200. Eben sabotaged the kitchen equipment and used his clone to fool them, so there won't be anything tying him to the case. Gustav kept investigating Eben for 2 days while training and visiting the border. He started seeing more strange things within the border the more he visited. However, he was more focused on dealing with the kitchen incident, so he only noted those weird things for the time being but didn't act on them. During his investigation on Eben, he also found out that he was just a serial ranked mixed blood. Gustav's strength had been increasing like crazy, so he believed he could handle a first step serial rank, at the very least. Time to go have a chat with Eben, Gustav said internally after another day at school, and proceeded to head towards the laboratory. Gustav had formulated a plan already, so it was time for him to visit Eben. MBO Tower, floor 602. Within the hall, almost 200 participants could be seen sitting in various parts of the hall. Only a few youngsters in white outfits could be seen at this time. Most of them left the waiting room when it started to get crowded from participants arriving after finishing the third phase. It was almost time for the third phase to come to an end. Only a few minutes were remaining, so participants still in the furry world could be seen moving around frantically, trying to look for a gateway. Most of them could tell the difference between the real and illusionary gates after entering the wrong one numerous times. However, the main problem they had at the moment was finding a region that gateways still appeared in. It was already well known that once a participant went through an illusionary gateway, the gateways wouldn't appear in that region anymore. They would have to find another region with an unentered gateway, and this was proving hard for them at the moment. This was because most regions already had participants that had gone through one of the gateways that appeared. Gustav was no longer focusing on the screen up ahead. Instead, he was currently engaging in a conversation with someone who appeared some minutes after Angie and Glade did. A white-haired girl with beautiful and slender looks sat on his left side while Angie and Glade were seated on his right. Maltida, remember what I said. It all depends on your performance during the test. I will not bother helping you out or anything. Show me that you're worthy of being an ally, Gustav said with a solemn look while staring at her. This girl was none other than Matilda, who wanted Gustav's companionship. I thought I had done that already, Maltida replied with a crestfallen look. Not enough. I need to see more. If that is all you got, then your plans are pointless, Gustav replied. Maltida stared at Gustav with a saddened expression and was about to reply when flashes of bright light appeared in the middle of the hall. Zing, 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 zing. The 5 supervisors could be seen in the middle of the room after the lights vanished. Gradier Zanatus was in their midst. He walked forward immediately after they appeared. The third phase is ended, he voiced out. The projection in front disappeared after he said that. All the participants gathered here at the moment has successfully completed the third phase and are entitled to enter the fourth. Cheer, cheer, cheer. The participants started cheering after hearing that. Smiles could be seen on everyone's faces because the next phase would be broadcasted all over the city. This was where they got to show off before the ultimate 5th phase, which would be taking place in another location. Before I explain how the next phase is going to proceed, we, the 5 supervisors of this test site, shall introduce ourselves, Gradier Zanatus voiced out. The 5 supervisors were known to the various batches they supervised, but to the others they were unknown. Now that they would all be supervising the rest of the participants together, Gradier Xanatus felt an introduction was necessary. I am Gradier Xanatus, the chief supervisor for this test site. Gradier Xanatus voiced out with an authoritative look. I am Tinant Valgus, a subordinate of Sir Xanatus. The female supervisor with blue facial hair all over her face stepped forward and spoke. She seemed to give off a dangerous vibe. Afterward, the male supervisor with worm-like hair stepped forward and spoke. I am Tinant Chucks, a subordinate of Sir Xanatus. He gave off a slightly easygoing vibe. The next supervisor was the female with black flowing hair. I am Tinant Airy, also a subordinate of Sir Xanatus, she said with a cold gaze. The last to introduce himself was the supervisor with a rhino horn on his forehead. I am Tinant Gondraga, a subordinate of Sir Xanatus. He voiced out with a deep and menacing tone. His name was just as intimidating as his huge figure. At first, everyone wondered if the first and the second supervisor were related. However, as the rest also introduced themselves, they felt something was wrong somewhere. Gradier Xanatus decided to disperse their confusion. Tinant is a rank in the MBO, as is Gradier. You will learn more about that if you're able to make the cut, Gradier Xanatus explained. Things made more sense after he mentioned that. The participants in Gustav's batch now understood that Gradier wasn't even a name, but actually a rank. Gradier Xanatus revealed a few more things to them, including the MBO tower. This was when they learned that the MBO tower here was one of the 6 in the entire world. There were other MBO bases, but only 6 of these types of the tower were built. Their main purpose was intergalactic travels. The MBO tower had a total of 1,953 floors. The last 50 floors, which were also the biggest, were constructed especially for intergalactic purposes. There were spacecraft of different kinds there, and it also happened to be that the last 50 floors also reached outer space. After Gradier Xanatus revealed some of these things to them, he finally decided to speak about the next phase. I will now give explanations on the next phase. Listen attentively. Chapter 201. After Gradier Xanatus revealed some of these things to them, he finally decided to speak about the next phase. I will now give explanations on the next phase. Listen attentively. The hall quietened again after hearing that. The next phase is going to be based on your capabilities. This particular phase has a lot of subphases, Gradier Xanatus added. The participants were once again confused by his statement, but waited for more explanation. In other words, the next phase is going to be where we test out your physical capabilities based on your bloodline and some other things. Gradier Xanatus paused for a second before he continued explaining. There will be a few subphases where different aspects of your abilities will be tested, one of which includes combat capability. We, the 5 supervisors, will observe you participants as you partake in each subphase. Based on our observation, we will give an evaluation that will reflect in your candidate assessment data. Right now, about 200 plus participants have successfully made it to this stage, and I commend you all once again, Gradier Xanatus stated. Like I have mentioned earlier, the next phase will be broadcasted across the entire city, so everyone will be watching your performance. When Gradier Xanatus got to this point, tension could be seen on many participants' faces. They were starting to feel pressure due to not wanting to mess up. Unknown to them, this was the aim of the MBO. The MBO wanted to increase the pressure that the participants felt while undergoing the test. Lastly, the grading system will be revealed after the 4th phase where your points will be displayed, and participants below 50 points will be disqualified. Gradier Xanatus pointed out. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Tension once again increased in the atmosphere after Gradier Xanatus finished speaking. Since the grading system hadn't been revealed, no one knew how many points they currently had. which means they had no idea on how much effort they were to put in to make sure they achieved 50 points at the end of the day. However, they knew they couldn't do anything about it, so they decided to give it their all like they had been doing earlier. Still, the fear of the unknown plagued the participants' minds. Now then, you have a 2-hour break before the start of the next phase. These were Gradier's and Nada's last words for them, before the 5 supervisors disappeared just as they had appeared earlier. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Dash, what are we supposed to be doing for the next 2 hours? Dash, how about resting and preparing ourselves? Dash, I wonder if this floor is like the ones we were previously on, some of the participants voiced out after the disappearance of the supervisors. Map, Gustav called out while raising his right palm. Truin, the outline of this floor's map was displayed in a holographic form above his palm. Just like he suspected, the map had been updated and was no longer that of the floor they previously were on. Everyone also activated their map and noticed this. Like the various floors these participants had been in, this floor also had an eatery, rooms, a training lounge, and some other places. The only issue was, apart from the waiting room, eatery, and corridors, other places on the floor were reddened on the map, which meant they weren't authorized to visit anywhere else. Gustav could already guess that the rooms were only available to the students that passed the special test. He was still intrigued about the mention of a special class. However, he could tell that not everyone that passed the test was considered a special class. Angie, we're leaving. Gustav stood up after saying that. He started walking towards the entrance on the left. He paused in front of the large glass wall on the way and stared at the city in front. Come with us, Glade, Angie offered while smiling before standing up. And you too? Maltida, right? Angie looked down at Maltida. While speaking, it doesn't seem like he wants me around, Maltida said with a wry smile. You both graduated from the same school, right? Angie asked with a smile. Maltida nodded in affirmation. Then you have nothing to worry about. Among all his peers from high school, you're the only one he speaks to. That already means he wants you around, Angie said with a smile. This girl seems to understand him a lot. I wonder what their relationship is, Maltida said internally before proceeding to stand up. Angie, are you coming or what? Gustav voiced out from up ahead before proceeding to keep walking. Angie, Maltida, and Glade approached Gustav from behind, and they all started walking towards the exit. Hold it there, rival. You didn't think you could get rid of me, right? A loud masculine voice was heard coming from behind. Gustav didn't need to turn around before he knew who the voice belonged to. Not this loud idiot again, Glade voiced out as she turned around to stare at the person responsible. Rhea and Timmy could be seen heading towards them from behind. Ha, cowtail, since you managed to pass, then ID naturally do so also. Rhea pointed at Glade as he spoke. You little piece of shit. Who are you calling a cowtail? Glade said while her forehead squeezed in annoyance. You know she could still easily beat you just like the last time, right? Timmy said with a look of pity, humph, as if, my only rival is him. Rhea pointed at the front after voicing out, but Gustav had disappeared. He looked forward and noticed that Gustav was already leaving through the exit. Hold up. Several minutes later, a particular table on the southwest corner of the eatery was occupied by a group of 6. Everyone within the eatery would occasionally stare at that particular table because of the loudness of a particular person among the group. You see, and that was when I managed to pick the right gateway. Ha ha ha, I'm pretty amazing, right? As expected, it was the voice of Rhea. Such uncultured personality. Gustav muttered with a distasteful look while munching on his meal. 6 is definitely a crowd. Chapter 202. You see, and that was when I managed to choose the right gateway. Ha ha, I'm pretty amazing, right? As expected, It was the voice of Ria. Such uncultured personality. Gustav muttered with a distasteful look while munching on his meal. Ah, 6 is definitely a crowd. Gustav really wanted nothing more than a way to ditch them because they were causing unwanted attention. However, he was pretty sure that his presence would still draw attention even without them being here. I guess I'll have to get used to such things soon enough. Life was so much easier when I didn't bring much attention to myself, Gustav said internally with a sigh. Well, they don't seem like a bad bunch. Let's see how things will end up. Gustav decided to stop whining and continue his meal. The group stayed within the eatery for the next 1 hour, discussing different things, ranging from the participants' current situation to life outside in the city. Ria, Glade, and Angie were the most talkative out of the 6, while Maltida and Timmy hardly spoke. Timmy was very cool-headed, while Maltida wasn't that much of an open book herself. As for Gustav, he only said 1 or 2 words and ignored most of the questions Ria and Glade asked. After a few more minutes, Gustav stood up. I want to check out the premises. I'll meet up with you in the waiting room later, he voiced out before leaving. Come on. Ria was interrupted by Glade, who knocked him on the head. Your loud mouth probably affected his eardrums, so he needs some air to blow into it, she voiced out. You foul-mouthed cow-tail, Ria replied while pointing at her. Another round of arguing started between them. Gustav arrived at the corridor and turned left. He started moving from place to place across the floor. He would occasionally bump into one participant or the other while walking about, and every single time they would stare at him weirdly. Word had already spread about how Gustav finished the 3rd phase before everyone else. Those who were also in the same batch with him also added that he had been coming first in the previous phases, which further skyrocketed his current popularity. At the moment, even the candidates that passed the special test started comparing their strength to his. They didn't want to agree to the fact that a normal candidate could be stronger than they were. They had decided to pay attention to the next phase, where they would observe the participants from a closer angle. Some of them also heard rumors about Gustav being the big brother of a special class candidate. However, they had one thought on their minds, which was if he was truly as strong as they heard about, then why wasn't he a special class candidate also? Heck, he didn't even pass the special test, so some of them that hadn't seen him in action felt his strength was just being exaggerated. After moving about for some time, only a few more minutes remained before the 4th phase. Gustav was currently loitering about the room area. He had been organizing his thoughts for the past hour while walking and making plans. When he got to the front of the corridor that led to the room area, a red barrier appeared in front and prevented him from passing through. Gustav placed his hand on the barrier. Looks like even the MBO barriers aren't impervious to energy installment, as expected of engraved bloodline. Gustav could sense that if he made use of energy installment, he would be able to absorb the energy from the barrier in front of him and break through it. However, that wasn't his goal at the moment. He only came here with the intention of confirmation. It's almost time. I should head back. Gustav turned around immediately after this thought came to his head. That's him. Some voices could be heard in the background. Hey, you're Gustav, right? Someone called out to him. Gustav turned to stare the corridor area and noticed that it was a boy with green hair. Beside him was a blonde girl. Who wants to know? Gustav replied. Except for his attractive features, he doesn't look any special to me. Are you sure you're Endrick's brother? The boy voiced with an unimpressed look. I don't have a brother, Gustav replied before resuming his steps. Hey, I'm still talking to you. Where do you think you're going? The green-haired boy voiced out before proceeding to move forward, but the blonde girl grabbed him. What are you doing? She asked with a confused look. Let go of me, you female simp. He pulled himself from her grip and started walking towards Gustav. I'm just going to test his strength, that's all, he, the boy voiced out after arriving behind Gustav. He cracked his knuckles and smiled before reaching out his palm to place it on Gustav's shoulder to stop him. Hey, you don't mind if I... Before he could touch Gustav, the green-haired boy felt a strong grip on his wrist. Gustav had grabbed onto his wrist without turning around. Before the green-haired kid could react, he felt a strong pull from his wrist, and the next thing he knew, his body was flying through the air. Whoosh! He was unable to regain his composure before he slammed into the wall on the right. Bang! Only 2 minutes left. I don't have time to mess around, Gustav voiced out before he resumed walking forward. Everything in the line of sight of the green-haired kid was blurry at the moment. His body had slammed into the wall with such force that he felt his vision darken for a few seconds before lighting up again. By the time his vision cleared up completely, Gustav was out of sight. The blonde girl walked towards him and asked, "Are you okay?" "He defeated me with just a casual throw," he voiced out with a look of confusion. From behind, a boy with black curly hair walked towards them. "So useless. You couldn't even stall him for 2 minutes." Chapter 203. The blonde girl walked towards him and asked, "Are you okay?" "He defeated me with just a casual throw," he voiced out with a look of confusion. From behind, a boy with black curly hair walked towards them. "So useless. You couldn't even stall him for 2 minutes." They recognized the voice and turned around to stare at the person. He was a young and handsome-looking boy who was about 57 in height. His looks were a bit similar to that of Gustav's. "Endrik," both of them voiced out at the same time. Endrik was Gustav's younger brother, who was currently 11 years of age. However, he looked like a 16-year-old. "You had one simple task and you messed it up. Worthless." Endrik walked to the front of the green-haired boy as he spoke. "I'm sorry, I don't know how it happened. They'll get him next time." The boy shouted out with a look of panic on his face. It turned out that Endrik wanted to delay Gustav, so he would get there later than the time. With the MBO being time-strict, he would definitely be disqualified if he arrived even a second later. Toy! Endrik spat on the green-haired kid's face, a boy who happened to be way older than he was. The green-haired kid didn't even try to fight back. He had a panicked look on his face as the saliva rolled down his forehead. "Endrik, what? Why did you do that?" The blonde girl voiced out, but Endrik ignored her and raised his foot to stomp on the boy's face. "Thump, thump. How could you let that useless trash throw you around like that? Thump, thump. It means you're just as useless. Thump, thump." Endrik kept stomping on the boy's face while speaking until blood started flowing from his face. The boy kept trying to beg, but the sole of Endrik's shoe would cover his entire face. So he wasn't able to get the words out. Thump, thump, thump. Endrik's face shone anger as he repeatedly stomped on the green-haired kid's face. He pictured Gustav's face being underneath his foot and started laughing crazily as he stomped. "Endrik, stop it!" The blonde girl behind couldn't take it anymore and shouted out while reaching out to grab Endrik's arm. "Get off, Paula!" Endrik not only pulled his arm back, but also pushed her. Thwum. It was just a casual push, but he subconsciously made use of his telekinesis, so she ended up flying far backwards till she slammed her back against the wall. Bang! "I will kill that useless scum of a big brother," Endrik voiced out while laughing as he continued to stomp on the face of the green-haired kid that was already covered in blood. There were about 6 candidates within the vicinity, but they only stared at what was happening and didn't interfere. Everyone was scared of interfering and incurring Endrik's wrath on them. "Endrik Oslov, back down!" A loud voice was heard in the hallway. Step, step, step. A teenage boy with pale, white skin sporting silver-colored hair could be seen walking down the hallway towards Endrik. He was almost 7 feet tall with a slender figure. His hair was so long it was reaching his buttocks area, and half his face was covered due to this. His looks were so beautiful that he could be mistaken for a girl. He looked quite weak. Still, the candidates in the vicinity stared at him with respect and moved to the side to create a path for him to walk through. Dash, it's Adries. Dash, I can't believe he left his room today. Dash, oh my goodness. Dash, I hope he ends Endrick's bullying. After all, he's a special class too. The voices from the candidates in the background could be heard as more and more candidates arrived on the scene. Adries' steps were very light and graceful. His eyes were closed, but he was walking perfectly like he could see the environment without looking. Endrick ignored his call and kept stomping on the face of the green-haired kid, whose skull had nearly been cracked open at this point. Back down, he voiced out again as he closed in on them. His voice sounded calm, especially with the way he spoke, but it was extremely loud. Endrick still ignored his call and kept stomping. Thump, thump, thump. Immediately the teenage boy was 5 feet away from their position. He opened his eyes. Troyan, a pair of beautiful eyes glowing with different colors, were revealed. Dash, he opened them? Dash, oh my goodness. I can't believe he opened his eyes. Dash, so pretty. His irises and pupils had so many different colors blended together that they could be mistaken for rainbows. Even rainbows could be said to be lacking in comparison. However, immediately his eyes opened. The surroundings lost color. Drudgen, it was almost like the color in the surroundings was being absorbed by an invisible force. I asked you to back down. Adries reached out his hand to grab Endrick's, as everything in the surroundings turned black and white. Endrick sensed a dangerous force building up around him and jumped backward. Tum! He landed a few steps backwards and threw Adries a provocative glance. What is it? You want to go? Endrick's forehead creased together as he stretched out his right palm towards Adries. The space around them turned weird and started to twist and turn. As a special class, this is how you choose to act. You're truly a child that isn't supposed to be here. Adries also stretched out his hand, and glowing colors of different kinds like indigo, velvet, scarlet, aqua, blue, cobalt, ash, and yellow started gathering around his palm. The tension in the air increased as they stared at each other for a few seconds, just as both of them wanted to lunge forward. Beep, 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 beep. A loud alarm rang out, and 3 officials appeared in their midst. One was in black, while the other 2 were in red outfits. That's enough, the one in black voiced out, and everything instantly went back to normal. Chapter 204. That's enough, the one in black voiced out, and everything instantly went back to normal. Treat him, the man in black said to the other 2, and they immediately went to take care of the green-haired kid. You're coming with me, the man voiced out once again before touching Endrick's left shoulder. Before Endrick could reply, zing, they both disappeared. Adries stood there for a while and looked around. He walked towards the blonde girl sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and helped her up. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded with a look of panic on her face. The tension in the environment died down, and everyone began to move towards the waiting rooms because at this moment, the 4th phase had begun. A few minutes ago, after Gustav arrived in the waiting room, the 5 supervisors appeared within the room. They appeared at the exact time after 2 hours had gone by. We will now move to floor 817. Gradier Zanatus voiced out immediately after their arrival. This time everyone arrived in the waiting room at the right time, so no one was disqualified. Troyan, Truin, Truin, Truin. 6 glowing doorways suddenly appeared in the middle of the room, and Gradier Zanatus urged everyone to go through it. The participants did as they were told and arrived in a large stadium-like arena upon going through the doorways. Everyone was directed towards the sitting area. The supervisors took their seats on the west side of the large arena, and a large screen appeared behind them. Zing, zing, zing. 3 more holographic screens appeared on the east, south, and north of the stadium-like arena. Now screens appeared on the 4 corners of the stadium-like arena, so everyone could see from every direction. Swee-eye, swee-eye, Some orb-like flying objects dived into the arena through the glowing doorways, and the holographic screens instantly lit up. The holographic screens started displaying different parts of the stadium-like arena. The orb-like flying objects disappeared after entry. It was apparent that they were cameras that could turn invisible. At this moment, the location of the fourth phase was being broadcasted all across the city. Every skyscraper and advert screen in every corner of the city displayed the event, and everyone was watching. It had been announced earlier that the MBO entrance test would be eventually broadcasted, so the whole city had been waiting on it. They were informed of the time, as well as the phase that was currently ongoing, so everyone was intrigued to see the participants that had made it so far. People watched from all across the city as the participants picked different spots to take a seat. It was like a stadium, but the space in the middle was a black-colored smooth floor. The entire space in the middle was as long as 1,200 feet and wide as 400 feet. The city citizens watched as some youngsters in white walked through the glowing gateways and found places to sit. Some of them already figured that these were the ones with privileges, while the youngsters in the normal outfits were the ones that would be participating in the current phase. Dash, that's my son. Haha, he made it. Dash, oh my goodness, my child is there. The cameras would sometimes zoom in on the spectator seats, and the screen would display the faces of some participants. The parents of these kids recognized their children the instant they were displayed on the screen, even though they hadn't seen their child home yet, which proved that they probably passed the previous phases. Most parents still needed confirmation. About 200 participants made it to the current phase and were about to display their abilities. After the youngsters had stopped streaming in, Gradius Anatus stood up from his sitting position, and all the cameras focused on him. Now, the fourth phase will begin, he voiced out. Everyone focused on him as he started speaking. According to your badge numbers, you will approach the static floor and display your abilities based on the subcategories, he explained. From this, everyone already deduced that there will be different categories. When your badge number is shown, approach the static floor. Remember, your data assessment scores as well as points will be based on your performance in this phase. A suit has been designed for this phase to aid in the usage of your bloodline, and also ensure that your flow and movement are not restricted in any manner, Gradius Anatus added before taking his seat. The participants were feeling tensed now more than ever, while some actually hyped up since the eyes of the whole city were on them. Candidates 00139 and 00327 approached the static floor. A robotic voice reverberated across the vicinity. It turned out that this phase was going to be taken in twos. Two participants started approaching the floor from the east and west sides, respectively. One was a male with short black hair and green lines on his neck area, while the other was a female with long purple hair and ram horns. They both looked fierce as they approached the floor. Immediately they got to the middle, a long black glowing wall extended from the floor in front of them both. Place your palm on the change board. The robotic voice resounded again. They placed their palm on the wall, and a bright glow covered them from head to toe. Their clothes were being ripped from their body and slowly replaced by an organic technological suit. Of course, due to the bright light, no one could see their bodies, so they had no idea what was going on within the light. By the time the light disappeared, both participants were now clad in full, white organic suits with blue and black stripes. The suits were a bit similar in appearance to full body suits, but obviously more sophisticated. Both participants felt more relaxed and flexible wearing it. The wall descended back into the floor, and the robotic voice instructed them to stand at the edge of the floor. The boys stood on the far left, while the girls stood on the far right. A long wall suddenly sprouted out of the floor and divided the entire floor into two halves. The boy, of course, was on the left half, while the girl was on the right. The wall had separated them, giving each their space. You have a single task right now which comprises of all the subphases. Gradier's Annatus voice traveled across the place as both participants stare at the wide space ahead. Do everything within your capacity to get to the other end of the static floor. Chapter 205. You have a single task right now which comprises of all the subphases. Gradier's Annatus voice traveled across the place as both participants stare at the wide space ahead. Do everything within your capacity to get to the other end of the static floor. Immediately after Gradier's Annatus finished saying this, the floor ahead of them suddenly started reshaping. Walls suddenly appeared about 400 feet ahead in front of both participants. Within the space and the walls between them, mini cannons started sprouting out of the edges of the space and the wall that separated them both. About 15 of them could be seen on both sides of the floor. However, that wasn't all. Truin. Openings were formed on different parts of the floor, and AIs jumped out of it. About 7 of them could be seen on both sides. Combat subphase will now begin. Immediately, the robotic voice gave the go-ahead. The cannons started firing blasts at both participants as the AIs lunged towards them. A battle began as the participants struggled to dodge the blasts of the cannons while engaging the AIs. Gustav sat on the east side of the stadium-like arena along with Angie, Glade, Rhea, Timi, and Maltida. He could already tell that these were level 5 AIs, one level lesser than the ones the participants faced in the first phase. The difference was that they had to face 7 of the level 5 AIs. Even though they were weaker, the participants had to dodge and destroy the cannons before moving forward. The green lines on the neck of the male participant started extending from his neck to his face and arms. His entire body was covered in those lines, and his face morphed into that of a triangular-headed, fish-looking creature. Green scales covered his face, and his arms grew some kind of long pectoral fins from their sides. Truk! He shot out an intense stream of water from his mouth, which slammed into 2 of the AIs headed for him. After doing this, he jumped towards the wall to dodge some of the projectiles from the cannons. The girl on the other side transformed into a long gray-colored serpent that was over 100 feet in length. Her arms protruding from both sides transformed into a crocodile-like limb, but were way bigger. The ram horns on her head had also increased in size. She quickly swiveled her way forward while curving and dodging projectiles. Swish! She swung her tail forward, slapping an AI away, while grabbing onto another one and ripping its right arm out of the sockets. The remaining AIs attacked back, turning their arms into different weapons ranging from blades to guns while engaging her and the other participant. The audience watched as both participants battled the AI's droids while being on the receiving end of some of their attacks. The female participant was the first to get to the wall ahead after dealing with the AIs and the cannons that sprouted out of the ground. She had blood oozing out of several parts of her body due to injuries received from the attacks, but she had managed to deal with all of them completely. Candidate 00327 has completed the combat phase. The robotic voice reverberated once again across the entire place, calculating combat assessment score based on the feedback of the supervisors. While the score was being calculated, the suit on her body suddenly lit up, and her injuries started healing. Candidate 00327 combat score has been calculated completely. Truin, the wall in front of her lit up, and the score 6-5 was displayed in front of her badge number. All the holographic screens showcased this too. Some of the participants began to panic upon seeing her combat score. That kind of performance only got her a 6-5. I wonder what the other guy will get, they muttered amongst themselves. The wall in front of her lowered, displaying a 200-foot-long space with a wall in front. This was another subphase that she would need to go through. Attack power subphase will now begin. A large board protruded from the ground. It was 9 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Strike the board with as much force as you can muster, the robotic voice instructed. As she stepped forward to do as she was told, the male participant just finished the first subphase. He got to the wall in front with a lot more bruises and injuries than the other girl did. Just like the female participant, his score was also calculated as his injuries healed up after the calculation was done. His score was 5. 2. The other female participant transformed back to her serpent form and squirmed forward with speed before swerving her body and swinging her tail forward towards the large board. Swee-eye. Spikes grew out of her tail as it went with full force and slammed into the board. Bang! A loud sound rang out, and the board started displaying numbers. 3,000, 6,000, 8,000, 9,000. It finally stopped moving up when it got to 9,500. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The audience started chatting amongst each other upon seeing that. They could tell that the calculation was based on pounds. Nevertheless, they wondered what score would be given for having this high attack power. Calculating attack power assessment score. Calculation complete. Her score was once again displayed on the screen, and it was a 7. 5. The male participant also underwent his by attacking the board in front of him with the most powerful water stream he could shoot out of his mouth. His score was calculated as well, and it happened to be a 6. 7. The test continued on as the wall descended, giving them access to the next space. Gustav watched and took note of these subphases as both participants kept taking part in one test after the other. After about 25 minutes, they managed to get to the far end of the floor. Chapter 206. The female participant managed to get there 2 minutes before the male, but both were worn out afterward. Even though their injuries were healed because of the suit, they still felt fatigued after they finished each phase. Candidates 00139 and 00327 can now leave the static floor, the robotic voice instructed, and both participants returned to their seating positions. 7 subphases, each with different tests based on candidate assessment data. Gustav had taken note of a lot of things when the first 2 were about to start theirs. The robotic voice went on to call out the next 2 participants. And just like before, the floors were split into 2 halves, each with subdivisions. Looks like the AI calls out the participants randomly. Gustav had also noticed that numbers were not being called in an ascending or descending order, which meant that anyone could be called on at any time. This further increased the tension in most participants' minds, since no one could predict when it would be in their turn. Gustav wasn't really bothered by the difficulty of the subphases. He was only thinking about one thing at the moment. There was a subphase where the participant would have to channel their bloodline while placing their hand on a particular measurement device. This time he couldn't hide it anymore. He had to make use of a bloodline during that subphase. This measurement device would record the rank of a mixed blood and display it along with some information on the bloodline like the grade and ability. He wasn't really bothered, since he already knew what ability he was going to display. As time passed, most participants were either first or second step Zulu ranks with bloodlines ranging from D grade to B grade. Even though one of the requirements for getting into the MBO was having a bloodline no less than C grade, participants with lower bloodline grades were still given the opportunity to try it out. According to the MBO, if they were able to get to the last phase with such low-grade bloodlines, they might be given a chance to get in. Only about 5 participants so far had F-grade bloodlines. The rest were mainly C-grade, and only about 2 were B-grade so far. Different participants displayed their abilities passing through phases. Not a single person had been able to get up to a 7 in the attack power subphase besides the Serpentine girl that was one of the first participants. After about 2 hours had gone by, Maltita's and Timi's badge numbers were called out simultaneously. Both walked over to the static floor to start their test. Everyone already knew that Timi and Maltita were among the strongest participants here, so they were curious about their performance. Immediately after they changed into the organic suit, the test began. Timmy dashed forward as red energy surrounded his entire frame, while a strange whitish mist started erupting from Maltita's body as a white rhombus tattoo appeared on her forehead. Thorthaikiak, her skin suddenly started to change color, and in the next second, she had turned into a silver-like being. She slid forward on the floor that was being transformed into her current skin color as her hand morphed into a long, sharp blade. Pucci. She pierced her arm into the chest of one of the AI droids, causing it to transform from blue and red into silver. Try. TRH. Try. The AI suddenly started malfunctioning, and at the same time attacked the other AI that was about to land a hit on Maltida from the side. This is the first time I'm seeing her use her ability on this scale. She seems to have increased in strength, Gustav thought. Although he had seen Maltida use her bloodline before, he never really knew what her abilities comprised of. He also turned to stare at Timmy's side of the floor. Decomposition? Or something else? Gustav activated God Eyes and zoomed in on Timmy, using his bloodline to deal with an AI. Timmy would grab onto a part of an AI's body, and it would instantly age and crumble. Nevertheless, Gustav felt that since this was the ability of his bloodline, he shouldn't be able to have speed. Also, he shouldn't have been able to pass through the gravitational area where the green ball of light was located. It's not decomposition. He's able to speed forward at times, increasing his speed by a lot even though it isn't his normal speed. He fired a red beam at one of the AIs earlier, and its movement slowed down. Gustav thought about this deeply and realized that Timmy's bloodline was actually a very powerful one. He can accelerate and decelerate the composition of things. That's really powerful. Gustav longed for this ability inwardly. Still, he didn't have plans of stealing the ability of those who hadn't wronged him or done something that went against his principles. As the test continued, both of them passed through the first subphase with ease. None of them were injured in the slightest, and every single one of the AI, droids, and cannons had been smashed to pieces behind them. Their combat scores were displayed as 8, 5. They had both gotten the same score. The entire audience was in shock because these were the highest so far. No other participant had gotten past 8 points in the combat assessment score since the test began, and over 30 participants had finished already. They continued on to the next ones and kept on getting high scores. Throughout the entire subphase, none of them got lower than 8. In the end, they were also graded, and their data assessment was updated. Both returned to their seats amid the cheers and discussion of other participants. For the next hour, other participants also went in and had their tests. After 2 participants that barely managed to finish their tests left the floor, Glade and Rhea were called on to start their tests. Both of them, just like Maltida and Timmy, Gustav could see a pattern here, and he looked forward to stare at the area of the supervisors. Chapter 207. Both of them, just like Maltida and Timmy, Gustav could see a pattern here and looked forward to stare at the area of the supervisors. There were tab-looking devices in front of all the supervisors where they input the data and observations they had gathered on different participants. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's eyes zoomed in on the supervisor's area, and he stared at them like they were right in front of him. The supervisors felt a weird sensation and looked around. Gradier Xanatus suddenly raised his face and stared back at Gustav's position. Since Gustav's eyes were zoomed in on them, it was like Gradier Xanatus was staring right into his eyes. Gustav flinched back and deactivated God Eyes. The supervisors returned their focus to their duties while Gradier Xanatus smiled before continuing. Gradier Xanatus seems really powerful. Not as powerful as Miss Amy, but his strength cannot be taken lightly. Gustav noticed this after retracting his vision. I have to be careful, so he doesn't see through me and notice my many abilities like Miss Amy did, since I don't know his intentions yet. Gustav focused back on the floor after making this decision. Internally, Glade, just like Timmy, had the same red-like aura covering her body. Still, the usage of her ability seemed to be different from his. However, when Gustav used God Eyes to inspect her body, he could see that her internals seemed similar to his due to the color showcased. This had Gustav wondering if their bloodlines were the same, but they unlocked different abilities for it. Having a similar bloodline to another mixed blood was not an uncommon experience, but there were always one or several differences. Miss Amy and Yuhiko had the same bloodline, but Miss Amy couldn't create things from thin air, while Yuhiko could do the same and transform one object into another. Yuhiko's bloodline could be said to be more advanced than hers. Miss Amy, being stronger, could create objects from thin air on a grander scale, unlike Yuhiko, who was soon exhausted after a few attempts. Either way, people with the same bloodline always share similar abilities with slight differences. Still, Gustav hadn't seen any similar ability between Glade and Timmy bloodlines. Glade dashed forward and smashed the AIs and cannons to pieces with the large sickles she conjured from the energy surrounding her. Her strength was very impressive, as well as her combat techniques. Gustav could tell that she had been trained well in combat, unlike most other participants who fought like novices. A slash of her sickle would sever an AI in two, and she would still be able to dodge the others as well as the shots fired at her with ease. Her tail swung at the back and latched onto the neck of an AI. She lifted it and threw it towards one of the cannons, causing both to be shattered into many pieces. Her tail was like having a third hand, and surprisingly, it could also extend in length. Not only was she different in physique, she also had a bloodline which was like having two abilities at the same time. Rhea wasn't doing badly too. Since his bloodline ability was attuned to rock manipulation, he already carried with him a few stones that could fit into his palm, knowing that he couldn't find anything to control within the vicinity. Twee, fwy, fwy. Stones flew around at extremely super speed, tearing into the metallic body of the AIs. Another thing that helped him was that he could increase the size of the stones to a certain amount, so he made it sturdier too. Glade finished before Rhea did, and her score was calculated to be 9. 2, while Rhea was given the score of 8. 3. Rhea wasn't satisfied after hearing her score from his side of the floor. He didn't want to be a sore loser among the three, so he vowed to do better. When the attack power subphase began, he increased the size of the stones to the max, merging them all into one to become as large as a small car, and he hurled it towards the large board in front. Bang! A loud sound reverberated across the entire place as the numbers went up like crazy, and the board vibrated. The rock crumbled to little pieces after contact due to the immense force from the collision. 12,000. This was the highest so far. Timmy and Maltida got lesser by 1,000 plus. Rhea was satisfied with this input, and since he hadn't heard any sound from the other side, he figured that Glade hadn't done hers yet. I'm definitely getting the highest in this subphase. You can kiss my ass, Glade. He shouted out in a loud voice while his score was being calculated. On the other side, Glade was currently closing her eyes as the red energy around her kept increasing in size. She had made the sickle she conjured earlier disappear, and right now she was conjuring something else. The red ore-like energy kept on climbing to the extent that the entire floor was now shining bright red. Even Rhea saw it and turned to stare at the side. What is she up to? He recognized that it must have been Glade's doing. Above Glade, a large red, cylindrical-shaped object was being formed from her red energy. It was currently as large as a small truck. Still, it kept increasing in size till it became as large as a bungalow building. Dash, what in the world? Dash, how can she create something this large? Dash, I can feel immense power coming from that thing, the participants said with looks of bewilderment on their faces as they saw this. At this point, Glade was already starting to look fatigued. She swung her arms that were currently raised up towards the large board in front. Sohov, the large cylindrical object, descended with force and slammed into the board. Boom. Chapter 208. The large cylindrical object descended with force and slammed into the board. Boom. Ria's attack sounded like a gunshot, while hers sounded like an explosion. The board vibrated with intensity and was nearly blown off, while the floor, which also took some impact, had a 50-foot wide dent, but it went back to normal in a few seconds. Waffle, the entire city, along with the participants within the vicinity, was shocked. They started wondering why a participant as powerful as this wasn't among the candidates that passed the special test. Looking at her strength level, she should be someone who passed. Same with Ria, Timi, and Maltida. They were all cut out from the normal participants, yet they weren't among those who passed the special test. This was something the other participants couldn't understand. Sweat dripped from Glade's forehead, and she trembled slightly as she grinned. I pulled it off. She stared at the numbers, which were still climbing. 10,000, 12,000, 15,000. The supervisors also stared at the numbers with wide eyes. The lowest so far had been 4,000, while Ria was the highest with 12,000, and now Glade has surpassed that. It wasn't that an attack power of 6,000 pounds wasn't powerful, but the likes of Glade were stronger than expected. The supervisors had thought that no participants would be able to get past 9,000, since these ones were supposed to be weaker than those who passed the special test. However, it would seem that this wasn't the case. Who knew just how inferior the participants with lower scores were feeling? Now the score finally stopped at 16,700, and Glade was given a score of 9. 5, while Ria was given 8. 8. Ria was dejected about getting lower, but he cheered up immediately after remembering that there were other phases. They went on to the next subphase, which was aptitude, reasoning/intelligence. Ria was able to get higher than Glade in this subphase by solving more issues projected in the space than she did. After some minutes, they finished the entire subphases. Ria was only able to get higher than Glade in just one subphase. Even in the strength subphase, she still managed to get a score of 9 by lifting up to 7,000 pounds. She was once again the highest in this phase. After both of them left the floor and went back to their seats, everyone couldn't take their eyes off them. Other participants that came next hardly piqued the interest of everyone again after seeing their performances. The participants would occasionally glance in the direction of Glade. They would also notice Gustav, who was seated in the midst of the 5 with Angie beside him whenever they did that. They remembered that he was also supposed to be strong and started wondering how his performance was going to be. They wondered if he could get as high as she did. Since he hadn't really displayed his bloodline ability, they didn't know what to imagine. Time passed as the participants went one after the other to partake in the subphases. After more than 100 participants had finished their tests, Gustav was finally called upon along with Angie. Candidates 00126 and 00121 approached the static floor. So it wasn't a coincidence. Could it be him? Gustav once again stared at the judging area while standing up. He and Angie moved towards the floor. Dash, oh, it's his turn now. Dash, I wonder how his performance is going to be. Dash, he is very strong, but can his performance surpass that of Glade? Dash, the girl is also really powerful. I wonder how high her attack power is going to be. The participants focused on both of them. They didn't want to miss a single detail. In different parts of the city, the students from Echelon Academy and the teachers all stared at the screens with wide open mouths. Gustav made it to the 4th phase, Was it luck? How did he do it? They couldn't wrap their heads around how Gustav was among the 200-plus participants that managed to get this far. In Gustav's former household, his father and mother stared at the screen in their houses with looks of shock. Is that Gustav? How did he make it there? This must be a mistake. I refuse to believe this. The mother shouted out, "Shut up, woman! Stop making unnecessary noises. And let me watch so I can confirm if this is a farce." The father shouted out and focused on the screen displaying Gustav and Angie moving towards the floor. Angie turned to stare at Gustav as they closed in on the floor ahead and smiled. "Good luck, Gustav," she voiced out. "You too. Give it your best." Gustav returned the smile after saying. They arrived on the floor and placed their hand on the wall that extended from the ground. Troyan, bright light engulfed their bodies for about 5 seconds, and after it died down, the technology suit could be seen on their bodies. The wall descended as the AIs and cannons started appearing in front. "Angie is sure to pass this subphase with ease," Gustav said internally and decided not to worry about her. "Now then, I'll focus on mine." A smirk appeared on his face as he dashed forward. "Dash has been activated, swoosh." Gustav moved once and appeared in front of one of the AIs on the side before throwing his fist out. Bang! His fist tore through the chest of the AI, and he instantly shifted to the side, dodging 3 beams which ended up slamming into the AI he just attacked. Dunk! Gustav bent with speed, dodging the sharp blade that was swung towards his neck. By the time he rose up, his fist was also ascending with him. Bam! His fist slammed into the jaw of the AI that attacked him a moment ago, causing its entire head to be uprooted from its neck. Swoosh! He dashed away again and ran across the wall for a few seconds, smashing the cannons on them in the process. Jumping downwards from the wall, he raised his legs and brought it down upon the head of one of the AIs, causing its head to blast open. Esker Whitechach. Electricity blasted everywhere as Gustav dealt with the AIs one after the other. On Angie's side of the floor, she was moving at a speed that even the audience couldn't follow. Once her after image passed through a particular area, the AIs there would be dismantled and broken to pieces in the next moment. Angie moved across the place faster than a phantom, dismantling the cannons as well. Not a single attack was able to touch her. This subphase was a piece of cake for both of them. Angie finished in a minute. Gustav was a few seconds later than she was. If speed was the requirement for getting the best combat score, Angie would have been the highest, but unfortunately, it wasn't. The supervisors had analyzed the whole process in slow motion, seeing every move made by each of them before giving their judgment, calculating candidate 00121 combat score. Angie's score was displayed, and it showed a 9.3, but Gustav's score was taking longer than usual to calculate. Angie had already started the second subphase while Gustav was still waiting for his scores. Candidate 00126 combat capabilities has surpassed the level of this subphase. Score cannot be calculated correctly, requesting permission to increase level of subphases to special class level. Chapter 209, Candidate 00126 combat capabilities has surpassed the level of this subphase. Score cannot be calculated correctly, requesting permission to increase level of subphases to special class level. The robotic voice announced its request. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Dash, what is going on? Dash, his performance surpassed the level of this subphase? Dash, what does it mean by special class level? Dash, oh, my goodness, I could hardly follow their movements. Dash, why is everything always different when it comes to him? The voices coming from the spectator's seat was loud and clear. Most of them couldn't even follow the battle between Gustav and the AIs with their eyes, so they had no idea about how well he performed. They even felt Angie should have gotten a higher score since she finished first. Nevertheless, they knew the AI was calculated based on the input of the supervisors. They believed that the supervisors wouldn't input the wrong data. Everyone watching in the city was just as surprised and confused. They wondered what the AI meant with its words and waited for the supervisors to clear the air. Candidate 00126. It would seem your combat ability is on a higher level than the setting of the subphase. Do you wish for the difficulty level of the subphases to increase to that of a special class? Gradier's Natus voiced out from his position. The screens were now split in three. The first part showed Angie, who was currently going through the second phase, while the second and third displayed Gustav and Gradier's Natus. Gustav stood in place and stared at the supervisor's area with a contemplative look. What would happen if I agreed to the increase in difficulty level? Gustav asked. He spoke with a normal pitch, but his voice was broadcasted across the vicinity and the entire city. First things first, although the subphases will not be changed, the difficulty level will increase, which means a performance that would get you a 9, when participating in the normal subphase would only be able to get you around a 5 or lesser when participating in the special class level subphases, Gradier's Natus revealed. Gasp. The participants, as well as those watching, bantered amongst themselves about what the purpose of the special class level subphase was for. Second, increasing the difficulty level to that of the special class level allows you to get enlisted into the special class squad if you successfully complete it with good scores, Gradier's Natus added. Within the Oslov household, the parents of Gustav watched with looks of disbelief. Isn't that the same squad our precious son was enlisted for? The father voiced out. How could they be thinking of giving him the opportunity to become a part of it? The mother voiced out in disbelief. Are you stupid, woman? Didn't you see his performance just now? The father voiced with a look of annoyance while pointing at the screen. Not even your precious son can do that. He turned back to stare at the screen, where Gustav was being displayed. He is no longer the Gustav we used to know. He mentioned this special class earlier. I'm sure it has something to do with grouping the elite participants together, Gustav said internally as he kept listening. You might wonder what being a member of the special class is all about, so I will tell you one or two things. A special class recruit has certain privileges that normal recruits don't get upon entering the MBO. There are some youngsters who have been chosen to be special class candidates right now. They are a group of elite candidates, Gradier's Natus explained. Dash. Oh my goodness. There was such a squad. Dash. Looks like he's hit it big. Dash. His brother is also one from what I have heard. Dash. What? He has a brother? The participants argued among themselves as Gustav contemplated. That kid must be a special class candidate. I'm sure the image of a curly-haired kid appeared in his mind as he thought of this. Becoming a special class looks good, but it definitely has its pros and cons. Special class recruits might get opportunities and privileges, but what if they aren't given freedom like the others or something? I could decide to participate in the test, but I have to find out more about it before deciding to actually become a special class. If I pass the special class level subphases, I could still turn down being a special class at the end of the test phase if I find out that it isn't favorable. Gustav processed these thoughts in less than 3 seconds within his head and raised his head up once again to stare in the direction of the supervisors. I agree to partake in the special class level subphases, Gustav voiced out. The entire vicinity quietened down upon hearing him speak. They had all expected that he would agree to it after all. Who wouldn't jump at such an opportunity? However, they had no idea that he almost declined. Are you sure? Gradier's Natus asked to confirm. Yes, I am. Gustav replied instantly without a shred of hesitation. All right, before I give the permission, you have to understand that getting below a 7.5 score in any of the subphases would result in an automatic fail. Even though a 7 score is higher than a perfect score for a normal assessment test, it is considered too low for a special class. Hence, you're not special class material if you don't get at least a 7, 5 in all subphases. Gradiers Anatus stated. So this is the case. Gustav smirked. 7, 5. If I may ask, what is the highest assessment score a special class candidate has gotten? Gustav said with an inquisitive look, although Gradiers Anatus wondered why he would ask such a question. He didn't see anything wrong with answering. The highest so far is an 8. 8 in attack power. Gradiers Anatus responded. Now, if you don't have any more questions, I will now grant the permission, he added. Gustav nodded and stared at the front. Since I decide to play it this way, I will have to go beyond. Besides, doing things this way will have more benefits when I make up my mind on deciding whether or not to become part of the special squad. Chapter 2:10. Gustav nodded and stared at the front. Since I decide to play it this way, I will have to go beyond. Besides, doing things this way will have more benefits when I make up my mind on deciding whether or not to become part of the special squad. Gustav concluded in his mind as Gradiers Anatus gave the go-ahead to the AI to increase the difficulty level of the subphases for Gustav. At this point in time, Angie was already undergoing the third subphase. Candidate 00126 side of the static floor will now undergo a change in difficulty. The robotic voice announced. The black floor started restructuring. Gustav was moved back to the beginning of the large floor. After a few seconds, it was done. It generally still looked the same as before. Still, there were changes like obstacles on the floor, along with sharp, pointy spears shooting out of the wall occasionally. There were places on the floor that had bumps and different kinds of things. The AIs began to appear once again, along with cannons. This time, they were level 6 AIs instead of level 5. These AIs looked sturdier and menacing. There were 7 of them, just like they were in the previous subphases. By contrast, the cannons had increased both in size and in numbers. Each cannon placed on the walls and different parts of the floors were as large as 6 feet and a bit more robust than the previous ones. Gasping sounds could be heard coming from the spectators' seats after witnessing the change. The difference in difficulty was very visible. Some of them already knew that they would struggle with finishing the subphase talkless of actually getting scores if they were to undergo this. Candidate 00126 can now restart the combat phase. Immediately after the robotic voice gave the go-ahead, the AIs and cannons came alive and started shooting at Gustav before he took a step forward. Fwy. Even before Gustav was able to activate dash and evade the beams that had arrived in his front, each laser-like beam traveled at a speed of over 1,000 feet per second. So it was like they suddenly appeared in front of him. Fortunately, Gustav still had perception and had already moved out of the way before the first one was shot. Dash has been activated. He activated dash the moment he swerved to the right to dodge the first. The other 3 were also headed for him. However, since they were a little bit behind the first, Gustav could dodge at his current speed. Swerve, swerve, swerve. Gustav dodged the green, blue, and red glowing beams shot towards him. Dash didn't really make his speed faster than the projectiles, but he could predict them before they were shot out. He was already moving out of the way before the projectiles reached him. Still, it looked like he was faster. Swoosh. Gustav dashed forward. Immediately, he crossed 70 feet. Gustav jumped upwards and threw out his right foot. Instantly, the floor below him suddenly pushed upwards. However, he had already jumped high enough to get out of its range. Bam! Gustav's foot accurately smashed into the head of the first AI, sending it flying from the top of its neck with wires and circuits ripping out along with it. Gustav grabbed the body and suddenly turned to his left to place it in front of himself. Fwy, fwy. 2 beams slammed into the decapitated mechanical body of the AI. protecting Gustav in the process. Gustav lifted the body of the large AI that was taller than 6 feet and weighed more than 1,000 kilograms. He swung it casually towards the 2 AIs that shot at him and jumped backward. Bam, bam. The body smashed into both AIs, sending them flying towards the spiky wall on the side. Prook, prook. Both AIs were pierced by numerous sharp objects protruding from the wall. As Gustav jumped back, he also dodged the shots of the cannons on the walls. He had to move across the floors carefully because some places had traps on them. He didn't activate God Eyes, but he could tell. Gravitational displacement has been activated. The gravitational force surrounding the environment suddenly turned weird. Gustav threw his arms apart and ran forward. It looked like he only did that because he wanted to run. However, the truth was that he was directing the gravitational displacement towards the walls. For a few seconds, the cannons on the walls turned their nozzles down due to the heaviness and ended up missing shots. Gustav made use of this opportunity to dash towards the rest of the AIs and smash them to pieces. Bam, 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 bam. He consecutively threw out his fists towards the last 2, leaving holes in their bodies. Pieces of the AI's parts flew across the place. Both heads smashed into 2 cannons on the left, dismantling them in the process. Gravitational displacement has been deactivated. Gravitational displacement could only be maintained for a few seconds, so it had already served its purpose when Gustav destroyed the last 2 AIs. The cannons regained their functionality and started shooting at him once again. Swoosh, swoosh, swoof. Gustav dashed across the place, dodging the beams in the process. He counted the number of cannons on each wall and noticed 7 were on the left, while only 3 were left on the right. Gustav dashed towards the right and leaped 100 feet upwards. Thump! He landed directly on the first cannon. He sat on it like it was a chair. Truin, truin, truin. All the cannons turned towards this particular one and started firing at it. Fun, 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 boom. Gustav jumped sideways as the cannon was blasted to pieces and landed on the next. The same scenario played out as Gustav jumped from one cannon to the other, causing their destruction. In a few seconds, the 8 cannons had been smashed to pieces, and he landed on the floor and dashed towards the ones on the left. Tum! He leaped upwards while raising his right kneecap. Bam! His kneecap smashed the cannon's middle as he reached out with both hands to smash the ones on the right and left. Bang! Bang! His fist broke them to pieces before his body started descending from the air. Candidate 00126 has completed the combat phase. Chapter 211. Candidate 00126 has completed the combat phase. Calculating combat assessment score, the robotic voice announced, and proceeded to start calculating Gustav's score. Chatter, 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 dash, that was. What's with that performance? Dash, why did it seem like he was faster than before? Dash, oh my, I couldn't. It only took him about 2 minutes to complete this subphase. The participants' voices could be heard, especially those in white that passed the special class test but weren't chosen to be part of the special class. They had no idea that Gustav would be able to complete this subphase so quickly. They knew he was strong, but they had expected him to have a hard time dealing with them. On the screen, Gustav's performance was being replayed in slow motion as the AI calculated his score. The crowd was once again astounded seeing his outstanding performance. There was no excess movement in the way he moved and dealt destructive blows to the AIs and cannons. They started to wonder how he became so good at fighting and who trained him. On Angie's part of the floor, she was already done with the 3rd subphase, which was based on aptitude/intelligence. Angie had gotten a 7 in that, and now she was off to perform the strength subphase. In the middle of the next space, a large cylindrical-shaped black structure extended from the roof of the stadium-like arena. It was very long and wide enough for 6 people placed together. There was space underneath it, which was where Angie was required to stand. The bottom of the large, cylindrical-like massa structure was smooth. The AI instructed Angie to stand underneath it and raise her hands and place her palms underneath it. Angie did as instructed, and she was told to prepare herself to lift its weight. The weight of the Travic gondola will be released bit by bit, and your body status will be observed in the process. Once it has been discovered that your body has reached ITS limit when the mass of the gondola gets to a particular amount, the subphase will yendi, the robotic voice explained. Total amount of weight, 12,000 pounds, releasing 2,000 pounds. Immediately after Angie heard that, she felt the massive structure above her pressed down heavily upon her hands. HNMF. Angie moaned slightly as her face turned determined. She held on to the bottom of the structure and pushed it up slightly. CRRKHHKK. The cylindrical structure moved up slightly, which proved that Angie had enough strength to lift something that weighed 2,000 pounds. Releasing 3,000 pounds, the robotic voice announced. Angie felt the weight increase again, pushing her body downwards slightly. Her legs bent a bit due to the increase in weight. Still, Angie slowly started pushing upwards again. On Gustav's part of the screen, his score was finally displayed. Candidate 00126 combat score has been calculated completely. Gustav stared at his score and nodded slightly. Just what I was aiming for. I will need to keep performing in a calculative manner to keep the scores in an even format, Gustav said internally while staring at the number displayed on the wall in front. Dash, what in the world? Dash, Hiji. OTA. 9. Dash, oh my goodness. Wasn't the highest so far. An 8. And that was even in attack power, not combat capability. Dash, he's amazing. The crowd was wowed by Gustav's combat score, which happened to be a 9. 9. The special class candidates had been training here since they were brought to the tower a week ago. So they had already undergone these phases as part of their training. The youngsters in white uniforms realized that Gustav had just practically performed the impossible. Hey, did you see him using his bloodline ability? Glade asked with an inquisitive look. Nope, he fought without it again, Teamy answered while staring at the floor with a look of suspicion. What would have been his score if he had made use of it? Glade's voice happened to be heard by others surrounding them, and this became the next topic of discussion. What is his bloodline ability? Gustav, on the other hand, was moving on to the next subphase, which was attack power. The floor restructured itself in front again, and a large board protruded out of the ground. It's been a while since I tried to test it. Last time it was 6,000. Let's see how much I've grown since then, Gustav said internally with a smirk hanging on his face. This was a bit similar to the board Gustav used to test his attack power back then in Echelon Academy. 5 months back, Gustav's attack power was around 6,000 pounds. He hadn't tried it out since then. I have to reveal a little bit here. I guess it's that time. Gustav breathed in as he arrived in front of the board. Angie and Gustav were going through different subphases. In each subphase, both of them were outstanding in their own right. Nevertheless, at the moment, everyone was more interested in Gustav's current subphase. Gustav stood about 20 feet away from the board. He closed his eyes for a few seconds and felt the world around him. He could sense the entire crowd focusing on him at the moment, giving him a kind of weird feeling. It's time. Immediately after he said this internally, he suddenly opened his eyes, which were glowing red. Combination has been activated. Blood Wolf transformation plus Bull transformation -1000 EP. His body suddenly started transforming. His body grew broader and taller, almost in an instant bringing him to a height of 7 feet. His arms bulged intensely, becoming muscular as red hair grew out of his right palm, which turned into a paw a moment later with 4 claws that were 7 inches long each. His left palm was still brown. It had no claws, but it was larger than normal, with prominent reddish veins protruding from his skin. Claws appeared on his feet, and long horns similar to the looks of tusks grew out of both his thighs. Chapter 2:12. Claws appeared on his feet, and long horns similar to the looks of tusks grew out of both his thighs. His face was the only part of his body that didn't transform. However, even with his charming looks, nobody could look at him at this moment without being scared. He had combined both beast transformation bloodlines to become this. Gasp, dash, he has a transformation bloodline. Dash, this is the first time he is revealing his bloodline. Since the start of the entrance test, dash, what creature did he transform to? I have never seen such a creature before, yet it looks and feels dangerous. Their surprised voices all around could be heard. The past students and teachers of Echelon Academy couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Gustav's current form. He was never able to do that before. How is he able to do that now? They had all had a similar question in their minds as they watched Gustav on the screen. Gustav breathed in intensely. Huff. He crouched slightly as he drew his right arm back with force. As he clenched his fist, his muscles bulged so much that his sleeves looked like they were going to rip apart. By my calculations, this might not be enough, so I'll add a little explosion from the energy container to it, Gustav said internally as his right fist suddenly became coated with a circular, milky, and red glow. Pho! The instant Gustav breathed out, he dashed forward with speed and threw out his fist once he arrived in front of the board. His fist tore through the air with speed and force before slamming hard into the large blackboard. Boom! It sounded like a thunderclap as Gustav's fist collided with the board intensely. His feet had already created small pits on the floor due to the intense force. The board vibrated intensely as it bent backward. Numbers appeared on it, changing rapidly. As Gustav redrew his fist, the milky and red glow covering his fist earlier could be seen on the board. Troyan! It spread across the board, and in the next instant, boom! Another explosion rocked the board again. KRYYCCHH. Cracks appeared all over the board afterward, causing the audience to gasp in shock again. The cracks slowly started to disappear as the board mended itself while calculating Gustav's attack power. I might have overdone it, Gustav figured after redrawing his fist from the board earlier. However, it was too late to stop the explosion. That explosion came from one of the energy orbs he usually formed with the energy container bloodline. He already filled that orb with power. Additionally, he also learned a new skill. With this skill, he could coat any part of his body with that orb. Once he used that part of his body to contact anything, the power absorbed within the orb would flow into the object that would explode in the next instant. Gustav slowly transformed back to normal. Well, even if it goes beyond, it won't hinder the end goal, he said internally while the score was being calculated. 7,000, 9,000, 12,000, 14,000. The crowd just had their mouths wide open as the number kept increasing without showing signs of wanting to stop anytime soon. On the east side, the supervisors seemed to be having a conversation. Sir Xanatus, what type of mixed breed did he just transform into? The supervisor with blue facial hair asked from the left. That transformation is nothing like I've ever seen before. The rhino-horned supervisor added, he doesn't seem to have a normal type of transformation. He has been fighting all this time without making use of it. We can't jump to any conclusions. We have to observe him more, Gradier Xanatus stated. The calculation of the number of pounds his attack weighed finally came to a stop at a number that left everyone gobsmacked. They already expected it to be high, but they still couldn't comprehend how a Zulu ranked could have such immense strength. 33,700. Dash, oi, isn't that above a Zulu ranked strength? Dash, is he truly a Zulu ranked? Dash, I think he's a serial ranked. Even the supervisors were having a hard time believing this. They knew Gustav was 18 years, so being above Zulu rank at such age was practically impossible. Nonetheless, Gradius recalled Endrick, who became a Zulu rank at the age of 10. So they decided to keep an open mind. Besides, there was still a subphase where everyone's rank would be revealed. So everyone believed that when the time came, they would know Gustav's rank. At this moment, they all believed he would be above Zulu rank. Gustav stared at his score with a wry smile. I really overdid it, he said internally. On the screen, it showed above the threshold. The supervisors have decided TO give candidate 00126 a perfect score of 10 ion attack power assessment. The robotic voice announced, and Gustav moved on to the next subphase. The next subphase had to do with aptitude/intelligence and reasoning. After Gustav arrived in that space, a projection appeared in front of him, which displayed some questions. Gustav began to answer the questions one after the other. Some were technical questions, while some had to do with leadership. Gustav was asked some questions based on how he would lead a team to victory against a terrorist group in a certain kind of situation. Another part was where the projection flashed multiple colors within 5 seconds, and Gustav was asked how many colors were displayed. Gustav was able to see around 79 colors in 5 seconds, which was higher than other participants were able to notice. As Gustav was taking part in this subphase, Angie was already reaching her limit in the 4th subphase on her side of the floor. Above her, the cylindrical structure was further pressing her to the floor, making her squat more due to its mass. At this moment, she was struggling to lift 5,000 pounds of weight. Sweat was already dripping from her forehead. If her knees kept descending due to the weight, the subphase would come to an end, since the AI would believe that she had reached her limit. However, Angie didn't want it to end here. She had only been able to lift 4,000 pounds successfully. If it ended here, she would be seen among the weakest, and she didn't want that. She wanted to surpass or limit her. And now, GRRHH. Angie groaned as her body started vibrating with intensity. VVRRHHHHRHH. At first, it looked like she was trembling, but when some of the spectators stared properly, they noticed that this wasn't the case. Chapter 213. She wanted to surpass her limit here. And now, GRRHH. Angie groaned as her body started vibrating with intensity. VVRRHHHHRHH. At first, it looked like she was trembling, but when some spectators stared properly, they noticed that this wasn't the case. Angie was vibrating at super speed, making her body look like it was a computer glitch as she kept vibrating. The large cylindrical structure above her was slowly being bounced upwards. Her body started straightening as she pushed her knees up. Arfers! Angie screamed as she kept it up for a few more seconds. Vroom! She finally managed to lift the entire structure up again, straightening her body completely. Huff! 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 She started breathing in and out while her hands were still holding up the structure. A smile appeared on her face as she felt her body get lighter. Finally, I got to the second step, Angie muttered. Just a while ago, when Angie was vibrating intensely with the determination to go past her limit along with the pressure of the large cylindrical structure pressing down on her, she broke through to the second step Zulu rank. Since the beginning, Angie had been channeling her bloodline, making use of the pressure to push herself further. Now she had successfully channeled it past the first step. Angie felt like her body was floating and energy started circulating inside her. Her bloodline increased in saturation, pumping more strength into her body. releasing 6,000 pounds, the robotic voice announced, and Angie felt the weight of the structure above her increase. Unlike the last time where her body had been vibrating, this time she pushed the structure upward slowly with a smile on her face. I can do this. She stared internally as she pushed it upwards completely. Glistening sweat was still dripping from her body. However, this time it made her look ravishing, giving her a certain kind of charm, most especially because of the look of determination displayed on her face. Releasing 6,200 pounds. On the other side, Gustav was done with the aptitude/intelligence subphase. He had gotten a 9, which was higher than anyone's score. The next subphase was the same subphase Angie was undergoing right now. The strength subphase. Gustav walked towards the cylindrical structure that was extending from the ceiling above. By the time he got under it, Angie had already reached her limit, and the test ended for her. She managed to lift 6,700 pounds worth of matter, which was her limit. Normally, she would be getting a lot of recognition from this feat, since mixed bloods with speed-related abilities were always physically weak. She managed to lift up to 7,000 when the highest was 10,000, which was quite unique. However, Gustav had completely stolen the spotlight. Everyone was eager to see how his performance would be till the end, so they weren't really noticing Angie. Only the supervisors had eyes on both of them and were constantly taking notes. Angie had gotten a score of 7, 8 in the strength phase, which was a lot high for a speedster. She proceeded onto the 5th subphase, which was based on speed. This was Angie's forte, so she wasn't in any way tense about this. All she needed to do was run, something she had been doing all her life. Immediately after Angie went into the next space, she sensed a weird feeling. This space was only about 400 feet in length, but it felt longer and broader. Spatial enlargement has been activated. Candidate 00121 can now undergo the speed assessment subphase. Immediately after the go-ahead was given, Angie squatted and dashed forward with speed. The instant her legs started moving across the floor, she understood why the space felt that way. For some reason, she had crossed over 200 feet in a second, but it looked like she had only crossed 10 feet. This was because the space was larger on the inside than it seemed on the outside. Swoosh! Every step she took felt like the road ahead was expanding, giving her more room to increase her speed. Now she understood why the other participants took longer to finish when the space was only as large as 400 feet. From the outside, it would only be seen that the participants were running with the highest speed they could muster, which sometimes made their bodies look a bit blurry. However, those participants would only move a few feet forward, even though their body looked like it was in fast motion. Only those that were undergoing the test phase would be able to tell that the space around them was expanding as they moved forward, making it look like they hadn't taken a single step forward. Nobody had been able to get to the other end of the room in less than 5 minutes. Angie smiled as she came to an understanding and increased her speed. Swoosh! She dashed forward intensely, causing an air-rippling effect as her body pushed against the space enlargement. Angie's speed increased to more than 500 feet per second, and it could be seen from above that she was advancing towards the end of the space in a few seconds. On the other side of the floor, Gustav had his hand placed underneath the large cylindrical structure, releasing 2,000 pounds. Even when that amount of mass came bearing down on his hands, Gustav was still placing them on the bottom of the large cylindrical structure with a casual look. It was almost like it weighed nothing to him. Dash, he didn't even budge. Dash, did the weight truly increase? Dash, I can see any sign of discomfort on his face. Gustav's casual expression was displayed on the screens for everyone to see. He was in his normal form, yet he was lifting 2,000 pounds like it was nothing. Releasing 4,000 pounds, the robotic voice announced, and the structure descended more. Still, just like before, Gustav did not even change his posture. Chapter 214. Still, just like before, Gustav did not even change his posture. His palms were still placed underneath the large, cylindrical black structure with a casual expression. His legs didn't buckle, neither did his arms tremble. Just like before, Gustav did not even change his posture. His palms were still placed underneath the large, cylindrical black structure with a casual expression on his face. His legs didn't buckle, neither did his arms tremble. After a few seconds, the AI went on to increase the weight to 6,000 pounds, and it still didn't have any effect on Gustav. Gustav held up the structure with ease and waited for the AI to increase the mass again. As time passed, everyone watching went from being shocked to amazement, and from amazement to disbelief. On the other side, Angie had gotten to the wall within 30 seconds after she decided to be a little bit serious. She didn't use her full speed, but she was able to finish the speed subphase within that time frame. Others had taken 7 to 10 minutes, whereas she had only spent 30 seconds. The AI displayed the score, and she was given a perfect score, just like Gustav in the previous phase. This was to be expected, since no one here could move as fast as she could. Also, the supervisors could tell that she wasn't using her full speed, so they decided to give her a full score. They also remembered her performance in the virtual furry world. After this, Angie moved on to the next subphase, which had to do with bloodline grading and rank. In a particular part of the city, a beautiful lady sporting gray-colored hair stood atop the roof of a large 200-story building. This part of the city was a business area, so tall skyscrapers could be seen all around. She was clad in a full black leather jacket and skirt with a purple t-shirt. Her figure was slim and slightly curvaceous. Anyone that recognized this lady would be very surprised to see the expression on her face, because at the moment, she had a beautiful and warm smile on her face as she stared at the footage being displayed on the skyscraper towards the northwest. "You're doing a great job, kid," she muttered. On the screen, Gustav could be seen lifting a large cylindrical structure. "You're playing your part. It's time for me to play mine." The lady, who was obviously Miss Amy, added and looked down at the roof she was currently standing on. "Will I have to take off my limiter today?" She questioned no one in particular as she kept staring at the roof. Faint bumping sounds could be heard coming from underneath. As seconds passed, the sounds increased, and once it got to a particular level, Miss Amy moved a few steps backward. Bang! A hole was torn through the roof the next moment, and a large piece of greenish rock came flying out of it. The rock was so large it could be compared to twice the size of a trailer truck. Miss Amy quickly jumped upwards and grabbed onto the large rock in midair. She placed it on her left shoulder while still in midair as her body, and the rock traveled on the roof area from building to building on the other side of the street. The distance between these buildings was well over 1,000 feet away. Bam! Miss Amy landed on that roof along with the large rock on her shoulder. "That wasn't as bad as I expected," she muttered while turning around to stare at the building she just leaped across from. "Just as before, I can truly sense it better. It feels like him. Why does it have a hint of his presence?" Miss Amy questioned with a confused look while staring in the direction of the skyscraper that was currently showcasing the entrance test. Just as Miss Amy wanted to turn around and keep going, she noticed something. I knew it wasn't going to be as simple," she muttered while turning around and leaping towards another tall building thousands of feet away while carrying the huge rock. In a study-like room, a man with smooth dark brown hair sat in a cross-legged format. He was clad in an azure-colored business suit. He stared at the person in front of him with a cold expression. A man in a full black bodysuit knelt in front of him and was currently speaking. "So, she has taken the bait?" he asked the man kneeling. "Yes, Sir Young. The kneeling man replied with a respectful tone. Tell them to remain on her tail, and not in any way give her a break, because the slightest hesitation will result in suspicion. We cannot give her any reason to feel suspicious, he instructed. Yes, Sir Young. The man on his knees proceeded to get up and leave after responding with that. The man seated reached out his hand and grabbed onto the teacup beside him before proceeding to lift it towards his mouth. He took a sip and placed it down. What better place is there to keep it than in your hands? He smirked devilishly after muttering those words. This man was none other than young Joe, the big brother of Hung Joe. If you do find a way of cracking it open, you'll just be doing me another favor. All you'll need to do is get it back, he added. After taking 2 more sips from the teacup, he stood up. Anyways, I need to prepare for my attendance at the final phase. Looks like I'm going to meet that brat in person soon. He smirked again as he walked out of the room. Back in the stadium-like arena, where the subphases were ongoing, Angie was already finishing the 6th phase and moving on to the 7th, while Gustav was still in the 4th, releasing 35,000 pounds. The weight of the cylindrical structure increased again, but this time Gustav's body slightly descended. However, in the next instant, he pushed the structure up again. At this point, everyone had been shocked, senseless, releasing 38,000 pounds. This was when Gustav finally decided to take the partial form of the mutated bull transformation bloodline. The weight became lighter the instant his arms transformed into that of the mutated bull. He pushed up the structure again, releasing 40,000 pounds. This should be enough. Gustav decided that he would stop and let his strength score be calculated after he pushed the structure upwards. Immediately he did that. He was ready to stop lifting. However, the AI made a different announcement from what he was expecting. Candidate 00126 has been awarded a perfect score in the strength subphase. Chapter 215. Immediately after doing that, he was ready to stop lifting. However, the AI made a different announcement from what he was expecting. Candidate 00126 has been awarded a perfect score in the strength subphase. After that announcement was made, Gustav stopped feeling the weight of the large cylindrical structure bearing down upon him. He retracted his arms and stared at the score of 10 projected on the wall up ahead. Such inhumane strength. He didn't even transform after lifting up to 30,000 pounds. The crowd spoke about Gustav's insane strength as he walked towards the wall up ahead. In the household of the Oslovs, Gustav's birth parents stood in front of the screen with their mouths wide open. His mother's fingers trembled as she pointed at the screen. Is that the same person I gave birth to? Gustav moved onto the next subphase amidst the cheers and chatters coming from the spectators' seats. On the southeast side of the stadium-like arena, a youngster with silver-colored long hair sat within the crowd. His eyes were closed, but if they were open, it would look like he was staring in the direction of the screen ahead. So that is Endrick's brother. Why wasn't he the one chosen for the special class? The youngster muttered underneath his breath. His power is immense. Even if I try to steal his glow, I doubt how dim, he added. I hope we can be comrades in the future. Gustav was currently taking part in the next phase, as Angie was finishing the final phase. Sprint has been activated. Gustav immediately activated Sprint as he dashed forward. Swoosh! Just like the others, he also saw the space in front of him expanding, making it look like he hadn't traveled more than a few steps forward. However, Gustav was currently moving faster than the speed Angie used earlier, so even though this subphase was more difficult than normal, he advanced faster than any other participant had. Unlike Angie, who didn't use her full speed, it was apparent that Gustav was using his. So, even though he currently moved faster than she did, whenever everyone remembered how fast Angie moved in the furry world, they would dismiss Gustav's speed as nothing. After 2 minutes of running, he finally got to the end of the room. This was also the fastest anyone had ever gone in the special class speed subphase category. Gustav was given a score of 9, and proceeded to head to the next space, which was also the 6th subphase. The last 2 subphases weren't really test-related. They didn't have to put themselves to any rigorous task, so the last 2 subphases were more of an evaluation. He channeled his bloodline while standing in the middle of the space. A bar was being placed in front where different kinds of readings were displayed. After a few seconds, the AI instructed Gustav to stop and move on to the next subphase. The last subphase was just his body undergoing an internal test. Different colors of lights scanned Gustav from head to toe. This was the same thing that happened with others, but surprisingly for Gustav, it was taking longer. Gustav recalled that this was the subphase where mixed blood grade was determined. They were trying to scan his body and reveal his bloodline grade. It was easier for them to reveal his bloodline rank as step 3 in the previous subphase because when he was told to channel his bloodline, he channeled only that of genetic transformation bloodline. If he had channeled the others simultaneously, the AI would be confused since the other bloodlines within him had different ranks. Now that they were checking for his bloodline grade, they will be unable to find any of his bloodlines if he doesn't channel it like he did earlier. The system was able to protect him from any sort of infiltration. So, unless Gustav wanted to reveal his bloodline grade, even the best scientists in the world right now wouldn't be able to uncover the different bloodlines within him. To save them the trouble, Gustav channeled his original bloodline, which was the genetic transformation bloodline. It wasn't the bloodline with the highest grade within him right now, but it was his original. The results were displayed on the screens. Wow, he has a B-grade bloodline. He shouldn't be so powerful with just a B-grade bloodline. I also have a B-grade bloodline, but am nowhere as strong as that. I have a friend with a grade bloodline, and I can tell y'all that his strength isn't even half of this. The participants spoke amongst themselves. Glade, Rhea, and Timmy all had grade bloodlines, so they expected Gustav to be the same. This revelation made them feel shocked. They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that a B grade was way more powerful than grades. The lights scanning Gustav kept scanning for more information on his bloodline, but they could only figure out a little. The subphases ended, and Gustav's information was displayed on the screen along with Angie's. The information they displayed about his bloodline was different from everyone's, since they couldn't completely read all his bloodline abilities. Candidate 00126, full name, Gustav Crimson, age 18, height 59, weight 67 kilograms, assessment data, special class endurance, 10, strength, 10, combat capability, 9, attack power, 10, speed, 9, mental capacity, 10, reasoning aptitude, 9, bloodline information, bloodline potential, S, bloodline grade, B, bloodline rank, step 3, Zulu, bloodline ability, transformation, unable to compute more data than this. This information was displayed at the end of every participant's subphase. The subphases were for the computation of every participant's assessment data. Now that Gustav had completed the subphases, his assessment data had been computed, so he could check it out with the badge at any time. Everyone stared at Gustav's data with shimmering eyes. It was astonishing that he could get this high even after the difficulty was increased. However, some parts of his data didn't make sense to them, especially where his bloodline information was displayed. Chapter 216. However, some parts of his data didn't make sense to them, especially when his bloodline information was displayed. According to the data, Gustav had a B-grade bloodline. This meant that his bloodline potential shouldn't be above B+, or At most A. Even A was considered rare if you had a B-grade bloodline. However, at this moment, they saw that his bloodline potential was given the grade S. Only mixed bloods with grade bloodlines could have this. Also, it was very rare because only 1 out of 100 mixed bloods with the grades were blessed with this potential. It didn't make sense that a B grade had an S grade potential. On a side note, they felt his strength was probably attributed to this, and his bloodline must be a unique one. He's definitely going to become special class. I must make friends with him. How come his abilities cannot be computed completely? This guy is on another level compared to us. He's just a step 3 Zulu rank, but the strength he displayed must have surpassed the serial ranked. How? Does this mean he can defeat other special class candidates since he has the highest scores? While everyone was checking out Gustav's information, Gustav was checking out Angie's. Candidate 00121, full name, Angie Villandrobadia, age 17, height 57, weight 49 kilograms, assessment data, endurance 9, 5, strength 7, 8, combat capability 9, 5, attack power 9, 8, speed 10, mental capacity 8, 8, reasoning aptitude 8, 5, bloodline information, bloodline potential, A, bloodline grade, C, bloodline rank, second step Zulu bloodline ability, speed, amplification, and discharge kinetic force. She really went at it. Gustav smiled after seeing her assessment score. Although Angie wasn't getting as much recognition as Gustav right now, the participants had to admit that she was among the most powerful here too. The walls around Gustav and Angie descended, and they were asked to return to their seats. The supervisors stared at both of them from their sitting position while having a conversation with each other. Has the score been submitted? Gradiers and Natus inquired. Yes, the higher-ups should be reviewing it by now. Still, I don't think they'll give us feedback till after the last test phase, Supervisor Valgus replied from the left, while rubbing her blue facial hairs. Which means he still has to participate in the last phase, Supervisor Chucks stated from the last seat on the left as his worm-like hairs wriggled above his head. But he isn't the only one with the potential to become a special class, Supervisor Gondraga said with a deep tone. He didn't believe that any candidate with the potential to be a special class would come out of this batch. Nonetheless, he now acknowledged the fact that Gustav might be more special than even the rest of the other special class candidates. The others are too, but since the AI didn't react to them like they did him, they will just have to try becoming a special class candidate the usual way, Supervisor Chucks replied. He will still be questioned by the higher-ups later on his sudden improvement. So much potential. They are bound to be attracted to him, Gradier Zaneta said with a small sigh escaping from his lips. Why do I feel like there is still more to uncover about this young man? Supervisor Airy, the second female supervisor, muttered. Gustav and Angie had returned to their seats after completing the subphases. They received attention from everyone around them, even though other participants were currently undergoing the test subphases. Glade and the others were intimidated by Gustav's presence, but he wasn't even bothered. He ignored everyone, as usual. Maltida, who was seated on his left, was feeling very excited at the moment. I was right to stick by his side. I need to gain his trust, she said internally, with his help in the future. Maybe I can finally change my fate all around the city. Gustav had suddenly gained popularity and became the topic of discussion everywhere. The people that were shocked the most were the ones that used to know Gustav from school and his parents' neighborhood. Wasn't he F grade? Why is his last name no longer Oslov but Crimson? They all had thoughts similar on this. As time passed, participants completed their subphases one after the other. Even though lots of them performed well, no one was really excited to watch them after seeing Gustav's performance. They would always try to compare anyone that appeared on that floor to Gustav. Gustav was receiving both admiration and envy. The same Gustav was currently not even paying attention to anything around him. He stared at the system notification in front of him. Hidden quest completed. Goal completed. Become a citywide known figure. As Gustav stared at these notifications, his mind went back to a few weeks ago. Bam, 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 bam. The sounds of beating echoed in the vicinity as a full-grown man was being struck down by a 56-tall silhouette repeatedly. Blurg. Why? Oh. You. He vomited blood as he tried crawling backward. While pointing at the silhouette reached out his hand and grabbed onto the finger. Before the man could react, a loud cracking sound echoed in the vicinity, and he noticed his finger had been bent to the back. Arf! He screamed out in pain while retracting his finger as he kept shifting his body backward on the ground. W. Hi or Y? Oh, you do. ING this. He asked with a teary and bloodied face. Are you seriously asking me that right now? The silhouette voiced out while moving closer to the man, who kept shifting backward. FLRWWHHH. He got to the edge as his body pushed a stone backward, and it ended up falling from the height they were currently positioned on. Kyrar! The man screamed out again in fear as he looked behind him. His body was close to falling off a cliff. He could see the bottom of the mountain, which was more than 1,000 feet away. This was when he realized that they were on a mountain top. The setting sun shone its light on this part of the mountain before going down completely. However, in that few seconds, when its bright light dyed the cliff area of this particular mountain, a devilish smile could be seen on the face of the person standing in front of the terrified man. This is for Boss Danzo, he muttered while reaching out to grab the man again. Chapter 217. However, in that few seconds, when its bright light dyed the cliff area of this particular mountain, a devilish smile could be seen on the face of the person standing in front of the terrified man. This is for Boss Danzo, he muttered while reaching out to grab the man again. Bam, 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 bam. Sounds of beating resounded across the vicinity. The man being beaten up was none other than Eben, the same person who caused the kitchen accident. Few hours ago, Gustav visited the laboratory in the form of the persona he had been making use of. After selling off the corpse of the mixed breeds he killed recently, he sneakily found his way to Eben's office. He assaulted Eben the instant he got in and fed him the sleeping drug he prepared down. Gustav held Eben down till the drug took effect and wrapped him in a cover cloth he prepared. He placed Eben's unconscious body on his shoulder and jumped out of the building through the window. After successfully abducting him, Gustav took Eben to the mountain area he tried committing suicide from in the past. Although the mountain had practically been halved since the incident with the system, it still had a remarkable height. Anyone who fell from the top would definitely have their body turned into meat, paste upon making contact with the ground. By the time Eben opened his eyes, Gustav's cold face was what greeted him. Gustav was squatting right in front of him with their faces a few inches from each other. Did you enjoy the nap? This was Gustav's first question to him. WH. At. Eben voiced out while moving backwards in fright. This might be your very last nap depending on how you answer the questions I ask you. Gustav stated while moving close to him again. What do you may? Wait, it's you. Eben muttered with a look of realization while pointing at Gustav. Before I start my questions. Gustav ignored Eben's words while saying, Did you think you could just get away with what you did, and there wouldn't be consequences? Gustav's face suddenly turned colder as he reached out to grab Eben by the neck. Grhuckle! Eben choked on his words as he felt Gustav's strong grip on his neck. Bah! SSDT. Tard. DIMSS. Tidial. His words turned muffled as the tightness of Gustav's grip increased on his neck. He felt he would be stronger and grabbed onto Gustav's hand to remove it from his neck, but no matter how much he tried, it was useless. Bielem, Bielem, Bielem. He pummeled Gustav's arm with his fist, but even with that there was no reaction. Tears and snot had already filled his face, and his vision was starting to darken. He stared at Gustav's face, which was brimming with coldness. He could sense the murderous intent exuding from his being. He's truly going to kill me? I'm going to die in the hands of a kid. This thought plagued his mind, and just as his vision was about to darken, completely Gustav released his grip. Cough, cough. Eben held onto his neck while coughing profusely and spitting out the saliva that was clogged in his throat. Oh, my bad. I got carried away, Gustav muttered while standing up. Now, where was I? Gustav asked while staring down at Eben. Yo, you, ho, W, or Y. Are you trying to kill a mixed blood? The MBO will come for you. Eben managed to voice this out while raising his head to stare at Gustav. The moment he raised his head to meet Gustav's cold eyes that were staring back at him, he flinched. Before I start my questions. Gustav clenched his fists, causing his knuckles to make cracking sounds. This kid, he might be young, but I stand no chance against him. Eben's face shone a frightened look, and he wanted to get up, but the next thing he knew a leg had appeared in his front. Swoon. Bam. Gustav's right foot accurately slammed into the middle of Eben's face. Arr. He screamed out as his body was sent flying a few feet back. He still hadn't gotten a sense of his surroundings when Gustav dashed forward, grabbed him, and started raining slaps on his face. Pa, 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 pa. Eben was like a defenseless little chicken in the hands of Gustav, who kept raining mighty slaps on his cheek, causing it to bloat in a matter of seconds, with blood spilling out of them. Ah, see what you did. My hands are all messed up with your filthy blood now, Gustav muttered as he let go of Eben, who fell face flat to the ground. Blood dripped from Eben's mouth and face as he hit the ground. Gustav stared at his right hand, which was currently bloody and squatted. He rubbed his hand on Eben's previously white laboratory coat, cleaning off the blood before grabbing onto him again. Now, let's try another part of your body that wouldn't mess up my hand, Gustav stated before throwing out his fist towards Eben's stomach. Bam. Blurg. Eben spat out a mouthful of blood as his body rolled back. Gustav dashed out again and grabbed him. Bam, 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 bam. He started raining punches on Eben's body. This occurrence led to the current scenario. Eben was unable to run when he figured that they were on a mountaintop. He couldn't go backwards since he would fall off, neither could he move sideways or forward since Gustav would catch him. He had no choice but to receive the beating being fed to him by Gustav. Gustav beat Eben up repeatedly and fed him recovery pills just to beat him into a pulp again. It took everything in him not to kill Eben because, at the moment, he was extremely incensed. He knew killing Eben wouldn't bring him any gains, since he still needed for him to confess about everything that had happened. This would also give him the evidence needed to deal with the 4 teachers from the disciplinary committee. Chapter 2:18. However, Gustav had something way worse in mind for the 4. He decided that after getting the evidence he needs, he would put that plan into motion. Bam, bam, bam. PLE, ASEO, you have an Ev, and Blurg. As, get any question. Tie-ins yet. Eben pleaded while vomiting out more blood. I'll ask when I'm ready. For now, take the beating like a champ. It's your reward for doing such a great job of killing innocent people. Gustav smiled like a psycho as he approached Eben again. Da. Mon SP. Are me arf. Eben screamed out again as Gustav grabbed his arm and twisted it at an unimaginable angle. Screams kept ringing out, and in a few seconds, all of Eben's limbs had been broken. After several more rounds of beating and suffering for Eben, Gustav stopped. Eben's face, at this time, looked listless. He had almost lost his mind from receiving unimaginable pain. He stared at Gustav with a look of fear and panic. "Now, tell me everything," Gustav voiced out while squatting in front of Eben. Eben, who was already traumatized by the pain he received earlier, started spilling everything about how he was approached by Mr. Lon, how everything was planned by them. After spilling out everything, Gustav got a system notification. Goal completed. Abduct, torture, and successfully break a mixed blood back in the stadium-like arena. Gustav decided to check his rewards from completing the hidden quest and goal after taking a trip down memory lane. "I hope the goal rewards are as good as back then," Gustav said internally while checking them out. Hidden quest completed. Achieve the highest assessment score. Rewards +1 all attribute stats. God Eyes level up +50 credits, plus 20,000 EXP. These rewards are not bad, Gustav said internally after checking out that of the hidden quest. He decided to check out the upgrade God Eyes got first. Gustav opened the system interface and proceeded to check out his skills and abilities. Skills and abilities dash. Level 6 sprint. Level 5 regeneration. Level 4 shape-shifting. Level 3 joint movement. Level 3 toxin immunity. Level 3 recreation. Level 3 bloodline acquisition. Level 3 slash. Level 4 chop. Level 7 palm strike. Level 5 God Eyes. Level 3 God Eyes had gone from level 2 to 3. Gustav decided to check out the improvements. God Eyes, level 3 abilities, 3,000-foot eyesight zoom in, visualize life signs, read internal energy, see through anything 3 inches thick and below, track life signs, see-through ability has improved, track life signs. Gustav had a contemplative expression on his face as he got to this part. The issue of life signs was something Gustav had been investigating since when he got God Eyes ability. Unfortunately, he always hit a brick wall after every research. These life signs were something every living thing that existed on the face of the planet had. Gustav always saw it on living things whenever he activated God Eyes. Regardless of that, till today, he couldn't figure out the functionality. The life sign on every human /Slarkov /mixed blood was always on the forehead. Gustav once asked Miss Amy if she knew what life signs were, but her reaction to his question was something Gustav never expected. Wherever you heard that from, and whatever you know about it, forget them all and never mention those words to anyone. Miss Amy forbade him from speaking, asking, or researching about it. This made Gustav feel extremely suspicious. Even when he promised Miss Amy that he would forget about it, he kept researching secretly, but it all proved to be futile. He could only see them, but now, according to the rewards, he could track them. Does tracking them have anything to do with actual tracking? Gustav wondered. He decided not to dwell on it for too long and activated God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. The surroundings instantly changed color in Gustav's line of sight along with everyone within the vicinity. Gustav zoomed in on the forehead of one of the female participants in the vicinity. Even though her blue hair covered her forehead, he could still see through it. He could see the sign, caret on her forehead. Life signs were always different for each person. Gustav had never seen the same life signs twice on two different people's foreheads. Gustav inspected the life sign on her forehead. The instant his sight focused on her forehead for 5 seconds, he received a system notification. The life sign caret has been saved. Huh? Gustav didn't expect that. To track life sign. Visualize the saved life sign. An explanation appeared afterwards. Gustav deactivated God Eyes after seeing this. If this truly enables me to track them, then I'll have to try this. When she is farther from me to confirm it, Gustav decided. He didn't want to get too excited about this, since he hadn't confirmed it. However, internally he was hoping it would be what he wanted. If it is what I want, then this just might be God Eyes' best feature, Gustav said internally before proceeding to check the next reward. Goal completed. Become a citywide known figure. Plus 2,000 credits. Host has received a hidden skill that can only be activated when rage has gone beyond a particular level. 2,000 credits? That's a lot. Gustav felt a rush of excitement upon seeing this. He could only get 200 credits after gathering 1,000,000 EXP, so getting 2,000 from completing a single goal was something he didn't expect. There were a lot of goals in the goals panels, and he could check for their rewards. Still, he had never seen this one before, so he guessed this was one of the ones that were at the bottom. This is good. Looks like I can save up for that bloodline. Once I get about 20 more of the same reward, Gustav thought before proceeding to check the next reward. A hidden skill that can only be activated when I'm enraged? Looks like it might never be activated. A sigh escaped Gustav's mouth as he thought. Chapter 219. A hidden skill that can only be activated when I'm enraged? Looks like it might never be activated. A sigh escaped Gustav's mouth as he thought. Gustav couldn't remember the last time he was enraged about something. Even when beating up Eben, who was the cause of the kitchen accident, he wasn't enraged. He always calmed himself down, which was why he was able to handle the situation the way he did. He could tell that this hidden skill was probably one that would only take effect when he lost his mind to rage. While Gustav was busy contemplating about other things and making plans, the fourth test phase was finally coming to an end. The last two participants dealt with the last sub-phases simultaneously. The AI calculated their score, and in a few seconds their assessment score was displayed. This marked the end of the fourth phase, which had been going on for more than 12 hours. Even though it took up a lot of time, almost the entire city stayed up to watch it. At this time, it was already early the next morning. So far, lots of participants had shown talent and promise. This was to be expected, since the more than 10,000 candidates that participated in the test phase had already been disqualified. Those left were amongst the best of the participants. Gradier Zanatus stood up to address everyone after the last two participants finished their test. I commend you all on a job well done today. Each and every one of you have successfully completed the fourth phase, but what comes next will determine if you get to participate in the last phase or not, he voiced out. As it has been mentioned before, an hidden ranking was prepared since the beginning of the test, where points have been attributed to every candidate based on your performance in each phase. The requirement for participating in the next phase is having at least 50 points, Gradier Zanatus added. Rest assured that even if you're at the bottom of the ranking, so long as you manage to get up to 50 points, you would be granted access to participate in the final phase. Gradier Zanatus had a feeling that some of them might feel this way, so he decided to add this. Now, the ranking shall be revealed. Make sure to check for your badge number or name. Immediately after he finished saying this, Gradier Zanatus took his seat. Troyan, 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 Troyan. On the 4 screens placed in different parts of the stadium-like arena, a ranking board suddenly appeared. On this ranking board, names and badge numbers of 233 participants appeared along with scores in front of them. The participants began to check the ranking out for their names and scores. Even though there were up to 200 names on the screens were big enough, so everyone was able to check for their scores without having to strain their eyes. All over the city, everyone could also see the ranking board on the screens. Parents prayed while checking for the names of their children, hoping they made the cut. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The spectators' area became noisy as participants began to see their names and scores. I'm safe, 60 points. 80 points, yes. I really cut it close with 51 points, sigh. I was really lucky this time. Damn it, I only needed one more point. How could this have happened? Some voices were cries of joy, while others were the opposite. Ha, you weaklings, bow before my 150 points, Rhea shouted out and stood while laughing after noticing his score. Oh my, he truly got that high. Damn, my points are nothing compared to his. Dash, with points that high, I guess he does have the right to be cocky. Voices of defeat could be heard coming from the participants sitting around them. Hey, idiot, check out the number 3 name. Glade folded her arms and closed her eyes as she spoke in a cool manner. Rhea did, as he was told, and looked for the 3rd name on the ranking board. He noticed Glade's name and checked for her score. His mouth hung wide open immediately after he saw it. TW. 230 points. He stuttered with a look of disbelief after seeing her points. Fool also checked 2 names below yours. Timmy also voiced out while folding his arms on Rhea's left. Rhea did that also, and noticed Timmy's score was a solid 200. Dash, he's the weakest among them all. Dash serves him right for being so cocky. Rhea's forehead creased as he heard that and sat down with a dejected look. How could they get such higher scores than I did? Rhea looked down as he thought. Humph, weak loud mouth, Glade said with a look of dominance. What are you talking about, Cowtail? You only managed to defeat me this time, but next time you both will kiss my ass. Rhea replied, while shouting out, I'm very sure I wouldn't want to kiss something so smelly and disgusting. Glade voiced out with a repressed look. You, who told you it's smelly? Rhea questioned with an annoyed tone. I can sniff it from miles away. What? How dare you, Cowtail? Who are you calling Cowtail? It'll kill you. Not if I kill you first. Timmy shook his head from the side as both of them argued back and forth. You both have no sense of your surroundings, do you? He said internally with a look of pity. He turned to stare at Gustav and Angie, who were seated on the right side of Glade. As expected, who else would have gotten the highest? He muttered while turning his face to look up. 1. Candidate 00032 Edwin Umbrella, 67 points 2. Candidate 00045 Estrella Lombard, 102 points 3. Candidate 00054 Glade Inayusha, 230 points 4. Candidate 00098 Gunter Badmus, 52 points 5. Candidate 00121 Angie Villandrobadia, 223.6. Candidate 00126 Gustav Crimson, 470 points. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.